portion of the program, you can just at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. As he surveys the state of the union in America, AFL-CIO Executive Vice President Tafari Gebre, hope and optimism. He says movement activists can reignite labor's fire despite constant orchestrated attacks on labor power. Gebre was able to grow the labor movement in conservative, Republican-dominated Orange County, California, and he says labor can begin to grow again in unlikely places like the South, but it means labor will have to build up its organizing and political infrastructure in the South.
Not only labor, but the entire progressive movement has abandoned the South for years. Meanwhile, we're going to run campaigns while building the infrastructure and practically making it being tested by fire.
Gebre says that labor has chosen 5 model southern cities to begin building up its labor councils: Dallas, Houston, Miami, Atlanta, and Orlando. Gebre says the emerging new face of the labor movement for fast food workers, taxi drivers, immigrants, and young workers is an exciting, positive labor story. As that movement emerges, he says, labor can't give up on politics, but it must put more effort and resources into strengthening labor at the local level, mobilizing members in communities.
We need to go back to what we're good at. That is investing in our communities, investing in our neighborhoods, and having a year-round political program targeting voters instead of elected officials. That's what I think we need to do, is reorient ourselves and get back to a year-round politics, year-round organizing.
1,300 workers at the Hunts Point Market in the Bronx have ratified a new labor agreement with 97% voting yes. Daniel Kane Jr., president of Teamsters Local 202, says it's the best wage and benefits package for the workers in 2 decades. Hunts Point is a huge produce market serving most restaurants and grocers in New York City. A Republican amendment that repeals the Jones Act could endanger U.S. jobs. U.S. Senators Tammy Baldwin and Bob Casey say that goods shipped between U.S. ports are required to be carried on U.S.-made, owned, and operated ships. The GOP amendment ends that requirement. The senators say that it puts thousands of U.S. shipbuilding jobs at risk. The U.S. shipbuilding industry employs more than 400,000 people, generating $36 billion in annual gross domestic product.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned and represented Bank of Labor, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. Bank of Labor offers a business Visa card with no annual fee and points earned with every purchase, as well as rental vehicle and travel accident insurance. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
This newscast made possible in part through support from the United Mine Workers of America. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rock on. Oh, and this town is my town. Alright, love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause I'm gonna stand and fight. This town is my town. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. Education. Seemed to be one of the key topics this week in the inaugural speech given by the new governor of Pennsylvania. And I got to say, I love saying that. We have a new governor, a guy I have high hopes for, a guy who I think is a genuine, humble servant of we the people. I don't know that I could have said that about the last guy, whom I'm glad to see is gone. And I think for the betterment of our state, that he is now gone. But we're going to be talking about education. The president talked about it in the State of the Union. Free college. Oh, my goodness. The right went nuts. How dare free. Wow. Kind of the same arguments that we heard about free public education, 100 and some years ago. That same wealth class mentality and the apologists for the wealth class that you see. I remember doing some research, years ago when I was in college, doing some labor history research, and I remember reading these robber barons of the era saying, those kids can be spoiled for education. If they get too smart, they won't work. And it's interesting to me that as you watch the policy debates, as you watch the funding debates, and as you see what's happened in our country, there's been a policy shift of certain groups, poor people mostly, being put into schools where they're trained to be, your basic hand laborers, and there's nothing wrong with work, but push towards lower paid occupations, push towards lower skill occupations, and then on the other hand, you got the wealth class who they're groomed to be the overseers, if you will. And you look at public education as part of what's happened in this country. To where you have the Bill Gates of the world, the Artie Duncans, the corporate Democrats and the Republicans who are saying, you know what, we need to use education to grill and drill and make sure that they have minimum ideas and know how to fill in a bubble so that they can stay within the line and conform and know that you have to drive around the building instead of right up to it. All of this stuff of training. And, I have a lawyer friend who says, I'm a very good lawyer because I was trained by very good forward-thinking lawyers at the time who, they knew they were training the next generation. It wasn't just how much they could make. It was about training and keeping the profession going and all of that stuff. Education's kind of the same way. What are you training people for? And the more I look at what's going on, I think back to those robber barons saying, you know what, if we give those kids too much education, they might not want to go down in the coal mines. If we give those kids too much education, they may not go into these dangerous environments that could end up killing them. They may think, hey, I got options. I can read. I mean, think about that for a second. When you look at this debate, what's really being said? It was all, and I guess it's something I've come to late in life, because I remember kids that I went to high school with, who went on. They got a college degree right out of college. I didn't until I was in my 30s. I didn't finish in that because I ran out of money. Truth be told, I didn't have the assets and I didn't have the family behind me to help fund it. I was on my own. So I didn't do it until I was in my 30s because I valued it. I think it's important and we should. But I remember those kids getting out of college going, I'm not taking a job working on the shipping dock like you. Even though you're making 50, 60 grand a year, far more than I'm ever going to make. I don't want to do that kind of work. It gave them options. And, you start looking at this stuff from the big picture of the 50,000 foot view. And that's, I think, what the Gates of the world and what these big-minded planners have in mind for the rest of us. And, when the president comes out and says, hey, we should have free college, you have all the apologists saying, no. Let them take on massive debt like we had to. And I sit here and I think this stuff through, and it's just mind-blowing to me that we as a society, as I would hope a somewhat educated society, allow this to continue. Yesterday I talked a little bit about a study out from the Southern Education Foundation. And I got 2 emails from lunch ladies, if you will, people who work in the cafeterias of 2 different schools in our listening area. The one woman writes, I've been a worker in the cafeteria for more than 20 years. I have seen dramatic changes over that time span. The number of children needing school lunches and needing assistance has increased dramatically, especially in the last several years. School lunch programs have always been in place to help those who have truly needed it, but now it seems more and more people are in true need. What can we do to make things better? And interestingly enough, and I've said this before, raising the minimum wage is part of that. For me, the other part of it is saying, hey, maybe here's a thought, just a thought. Maybe we make lunch accessible for everyone. So, and this is where I think the right wing should take on to this, because things look worse when you have more than half of the students in schools today needing free lunch or subsidized lunch. There's a problem in society. I mean, that's kind of like the canary in the mine shaft. That's saying, hey, over here, problem. Woo. We have Houston. We have a problem. And for me, it comes down to, look, when I was a kid, I had to get free lunch as a kid as well. My mother never made enough money to get us above that threshold. And I remember how horrible it was to have to go in the special line. I understand things are better now, but you had to go through the special line and you got a special lunch, which I understand some school districts still do. I hope none in this area. But, it's that dividing us that frustrates me. It's that dividing us that concerns me. And the more we look through this stuff, the more I keep saying maybe we should start thinking about, as a society, saying that we want educated children. We don't want people divided at that age group. And college is the next high school graduation. An associate's degree, we might as well just make it K through 14. Because the reality is, we need a much more educated workforce, but not just in who can fill in the bubbles and who knows how to put the round this peg into that peg. We need critical thinkers. And for me, it's a huge difference in how we educate the different classes of children. You go down to Florida, Orange County, Florida, they're taking recess away. Can't have those kids playing. They've got to learn the test. Grill and drill, as where, you look at the place where Steve Jobs, I just read an article about Steve Jobs' kids and the schools that they went to that didn't even have computers. Didn't care if they learned about computers. They got computers in my kid's kindergarten class. The Steve Jobs didn't have them. They've got toys. They play. They think. It's not about learning to fill in the bubble. My kindergartner's taking fill in the bubble tests. I'm not happy with that. And that's been a change over the last couple of years. When my oldest daughter began kindergarten, they had kitchen sets and they had playthings to where they were learning things while playing. And now it's sit and write, sit and do math. It's scary times. And for me, this is where I'm hoping, and we're going to talk to a couple people who are involved in organizing, taking education back. We're going to talk to Jerry Jordan, hopefully, from the Philadelphia Teachers Union, to come talk about, the huge win they had today. Congratulations to them. But also, where we should be going and what the hopes for Governor Wolf are. I got to tell you, huge obstacles for this governor to return the funding levels that former Governor Corbett took out. And the crisis in education that I think that guy alone has caused to our system for at least, in my view, a generation. So that we've got tons of stuff to talk about on education, some stuff on McDonald's, some stuff on minimum wage, lots of stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your comments. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425, or you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break right here. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to We're Working People. Come to talk.
just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1890. Miners from a number of smaller miner unions gathered in Columbus, Ohio, to consolidate their ranks and form the United Mine Workers of America. During that first convention, the newly formed UMWA adopted a constitution barring discrimination based on race, religion, or national origin, as UMWA founders clearly recognized the destructive power of division. The United Mine Workers became a national leader in the fight for union rights in the United States. The union has been led by such significant voices of the common man as John L. Lewis, John Mitchell, and Mother Jones. The Constitution, adapted on this day in labor history, begins, "There is no fact more generally known, nor more widely believed, than that without coal there would not have been such grand achievements, privileges, and blessings as those which characterize the 19th century civilization. And believing, as we do, that those whose lot it is to daily toil in the recesses of the earth are entitled to a fair and equitable share of the same." The UMWA pledged to use all honorable means to maintain peace between ourselves and employers, adjusting all differences as far as possible by arbitration and conciliation, that strikes may become unnecessary. With their constitution in place, the United Mine Workers stood at the forefront of many national struggles for working people. They helped to lead the charge for the 8-hour day in the 1890s, then were a powerful voice to secure collective bargaining rights in the 1930s. While a powerful and influential member of the American Federation of Labor, the UMWA was a major force behind the founding of the Congress of Industrial Organizations. The CIO helped to organize nearly 4 million new workers in industries such as steel and automaking in the 1930s. Through its principles and policies, strength and unity, the UMWA has been an inspiration to generations of working families for more than 100 years.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. Ahead of the State of the Union address, Fox News White House correspondent Ed Henry reported that President Obama would focus a large portion of his speech on the rebounding U.S. economy. Henry suggested the reason behind Obama's optimistic economic note was to distract voters from upheaval overseas.
Remember, it was only a few months ago that the president and his aides were holding up Yemen as a success story on his counter-terror efforts. That has fallen apart, as has the president's claim that Al-Qaeda is on the run. So they want to talk a lot more about the economy, not so much on national security.
In contrast, Fox News and other conservative media outlets have previously accused the Obama administration of using foreign policy to distract from the economy. For example, in 2013, radio host Rush Limbaugh accused President Obama of intervening in the Syrian Islamic State crisis to distract voters from economic issues.
He just did this to distract everybody's attention from Obamacare, the defund effort, from the economy. All Syria was for Obama was a diversion, a way to distract people's attention.
For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Just raise your head up and stand up. No fear in your heart. Tell me love and no never die.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. You may remember last year we talked at length about the School Reform Commission in Philadelphia, the SRC, who just decided once they got the cigarette tax, because they needed the union to go and help them get the cigarette tax passed through, they decided that they would just take the union's contract and put it through a shredder and say, sorry, we used to recognize you, but no more. No more. We're going to tear your contract up and you'll take what we give you. And I remember saying at the time, this cannot possibly stand. Well, today a Commonwealth court said, no, can't stand, which is why we've asked Jerry Jordan. He's the president of the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers to come talk with us. Jerry, thanks for taking time for us.
You're quite welcome. It's good to be with you.
So one, I guess, right from the start, congratulations. This, I guess we knew this was going to happen, but congratulations that it did.
Well, thank you. And we are really, really very, very pleased with the decision of the Commonwealth Court that affirmed the position that the PFT took.
So in looking at this, you go back a little bit and you look at how all this developed, all of the resource, all of the time, all of the money wasted. Does it end here or does it continue?
I don't know. That answer would have to be given by the School Reform Commission, and they will have to decide whether or not they're going to appeal the decision or not. They certainly appealed the decision that we got when we went to Common Pleas Court asking for a stay, and we were granted that, and they then appealed it to the Commonwealth Court. So the ball's in their court.
Right.
I hope that they would choose not to waste more dollars on litigation and would just, get back to the bargaining table and let's negotiate a contract.
And I mean, that's at the end of all this. This is, in my opinion, this is the SRC taking a page out of the Scott Wagner playbook and getting the baseball bat out, saying you'll take what we'll give you, or you'll get nothing, without sitting down and having an actual discussion.
Well, that's exactly right, and that we had been negotiating for over a year, and we had not reached impasse, and the School Reform Commission decided and admitted that they really would have done this sooner. However, they wanted to wait until the cigarette tax passed, and they thought that it would pass by the June 30th deadline for the budget, and because it did not pass in that session, and we had to wait until another session began, that they decided to wait until October 6th to be exact, to then impose a new working conditions in terms of employment on the members of the PFT and not negotiate them.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of this, with the new governor here, and this is one of the questions that popped in my head as I was reading this, with the new governor, with Tom Wolf taking the reins, is there a way, because I got to be honest, I've yet to talk to anyone who has any confidence in the people who are sitting on the SRC, especially Mr. Green. Is there any way of maybe appointing new people? What's the system down there?
The system is that the governor appoints 3 members of the commission, and they have terms of 5 years, and I think 1 of 5 years and 2 of 7 years. And the mayor of Philadelphia appoints 2 members, and each of them has a term of 3 years.
So, in looking at this, is there any way to change the complexity of the board in the near term, or is that are their time on the board, is that down the road still?
They each have a lot of time on their terms of office. However, since they were appointed by Governor Corbett, they may very well choose to leave the board because now there is a new governor, and they may not want to serve under that governor.
Yeah, I mean, because right now I have to think that from an ideological standpoint, that the new governor's position on education is much different than the Corbett plan was, and the hope is that with this new leadership there'll be a new direction so that this kind of stuff stops and that everyone works together to get really inevitably what we want: educated children.
Yes, I hope that is the case, because certainly the governor, I'm really pleased to be able to say governor now. Governor Wolf really wants to make sure that all the children in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania get a high-quality education. He campaigned on that issue. And so we're looking forward to that happening and look forward to working with him. And we just can't work alone. We need to have leaders on the School Reform Commission or a school board who are willing and want to work together as well.
Yeah, at the end of this, though, it comes down, in my view, to funding. And I look at what happened, with the SRC trying to impose its will. I look at the York City School District, where the district's receiver, their managers, is trying to is actually putting them into a for-profit charter mode. To me, it all comes down to the funding problems that I think have systematically been created by the people who are not big fans of public education.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%.
So the question becomes, how do we undo these crises? And with, look, the governor's obviously going to be on the side of public education, but you look at the complexity of the House and the Senate, overwhelmingly Republican, and I would argue a good portion of crazy right-wing Republican. How are we going to get them on board?
Well, I think that we have to focus on the fact that in each of their districts, they have school districts, and they serve the children in their communities. And just as we have our financial issues here in Philadelphia, in many of the communities around the Commonwealth, they too have financial crises and are dealing with them in multiple ways. One being that they're increasing property taxes because of the lack of funding from the state. So that, those elected officials who may very well not be from Philadelphia, but from other parts of the Commonwealth, have their issues too. And they have their constituents who are feeling the pinch from the constantly increasing property taxes. So I think that they have an incentive to try to increase the amount of appropriations being spent, from being given to their districts, so that their residents will not have to deal with another tax increase.
Right. But I want to go back to a second to Judge McCullough's ruling. Part of what angered me is it appeared to me, and I never really got any confirmation, but it appeared to me to be a theft of money that had been built up or was supposedly built up in the healthcare system that the union administers, something like $50 million that they were going to claw back. Did the judge have anything to say about that?
Well, yes. The ruling said that the School Reform Commission could not do any of the things that they passed in their resolution on October 6th.
Wow, so there's not even a hope there for them.
No. And regarding the amount of money in the fund, a fund has to have a certain amount of reserve.
Certainly.
In order to fund, to keep the fund solvent. And so therefore it's not as if, it's a lot of money that is, or any money that's being wasted, but it's just a fund reserve that, you should really have about a year's fund reserve in order to maintain a fund. And we have been very, very prudent. We have, run our health and welfare fund in a much better fashion than the school district has operated with the funds that it has.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, it just seemed like that was the game. That was one, we're going to impose our will on these teachers, and two, we're going to steal back part of their wages because obviously healthcare is part of the compensation package of deferred compensation. But I look at this and I'm hopeful that with this ruling, all of this nonsense gets set aside. And you get them. I wish they would have spent as much effort going after your members. I wish they would have spent that kind of effort going after Corbett and the people who took the money out of the system. I think that would have been time and money better spent.
I agree with you 100%.
Because at the end of this, this butting heads, this adversarial nonsense doesn't help. Definitely doesn't help the children. Doesn't help their parents. Doesn't help the teachers, and certainly doesn't help taxpayers.
No, it doesn't. And when all is said and done, after all of this, we are going to have to get back to the table, negotiate a contract that's going to be fair to the employees and good for children. So we should have done that a long time ago.
Absolutely. And as I understand, there have been numerous concessions by the teachers over the years to try and help bring down some of the the lack of funding that's been put forth by the state.
Yes, we have made concessions to save the district millions of dollars over the last several contracts that we've negotiated.
At the end of it, the other part of this it's the charter school issue, isn't it?
Oh, it's a huge issue because 1/3 of the school district's budget is now being spent on charter schools.
And how many students do they actually educate?
About 60,000 now in Philadelphia.
And of the 1/3 of the amount of money we're spending, is that 1/3 of the student body, or is it less?
It's about 1/3 of the student body.
Okay. Because as I was reading it, and I have one last question. There was a statistic that came out not too long ago that the school district operated at something like $100 million loss, whereas the charter schools had like a $70 million surplus. Where'd that money go?
It remains with the charter school.
Okay.
That's one of those glitches in the charter school law that certainly needs to be corrected by the legislature.
And that'll be something.
That's money that comes from the local body, and it should be returned so that it would be able to be used to deal with closing deficits. Why should they maintain the tax dollars and other schools do without?
Yeah, maybe that would be some time better spent for the SRC to go after rather than going after the teachers.
For sure.
For sure. Jerry, I appreciate you taking time for us. Congratulations on the big win, and I hope this ends here.
I hope so, too. Thank you so much, Rick.
Thanks.
Always good to be with you.
All right, I appreciate it. Jerry Jordan, president of the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers. Look, big day. I think a fantastic day for them. Now, maybe it's possible they're going to actually get down to doing the work that they should have been doing last year. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
This is why we fight, why we lie awake. This is why we fight.
Finally, radio for the rest of us. Rick Smith.
The weather and climate that you've grown up with is not going to be the weather and climate you're going to experience or your children are going to experience.
Confirmed again. 2014 breaks the record for hottest year.
Headline in the New York Times, ocean life faces mass extinction. Is that bad?
Yeah, that's bad. More new studies warn human impacts threaten our life support systems. Plus,
any glimmer of hopefulness in all this?
A glimmer of hopefulness in all this.
There better be all of those glimmers and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
My religious beliefs are one of many things that inform me that we couldn't have any impact on the climate, the planet, the globe, creation, no matter what, no matter how much we wanted to.
Oh, thanks for that, Rush Limbaugh. Very persuasive. This is your Green News Report.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there.
Okay, Desi Doyen, the climate change deniers, since the news came out last week from NOAA and NASA, that I know you're going to talk about it in a second, the climate change deniers seem to be besides themselves. They don't know what to think. They're making stuff up. They're claiming, oh, NASA says they're not really sure 2014 was the hottest year. It's kind of amusing to watch, were it not really kind of scary.
Yeah, it is kind of scary because they're doing everything they can to stop any kind of climate action policy from being implemented.
And that's what this is really all about, trying to defend the fossil fuel industry. And that's whether some of these dopes realize it or not. Okay, tell us, Des, what is it that all these right-wingers are now flipping out about?
Okay, it is confirmed. 2014 was the hottest year in recorded history for the planet since record-keeping began in 1880. That is according to both NASA and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, confirming previous findings by the Japan Meteorological Agency. The long-term trend of rising global temperatures is undeniable, according to Gavin Schmidt, director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, here on PBS NewsHour.
What we're seeing is a long-term trend that is producing record warm year after record warm year. And we can attribute those changes mainly to the increase in greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide, that we've been putting into the atmosphere. And so we have a fingerprint of change that's associated with human activities, and that fingerprint fits the evidence that we're seeing in the data.
And of course, just to point out to the deniers that even though the eastern U.S. had a really cold winter, the western U.S. and the rest of the world saw record warmth. 5 months last year all had all-time new temperature records, and the oceans were also record warm around the world. But wait, there's more. An international team of researchers warn that humanity is, quote, eating away at our own life support systems at a rate unseen in the past 10,000 years.
Oh, aren't you just little Miss Smiley? Nothing but good news today.
Yeah, sorry. These two major new studies measure humanity's impact, and they warn that we're pushing the boundaries of the planet's life support systems in 4 areas. Those 4 areas are climate change, biodiversity loss, nutrient pollution from fertilizers, and ocean acidification.
And the studies warn that we are losing on all 4 of those fronts?
Yes. For example, they say that we use 8 times more fertilizer than we used in 1950, and a lot of that is running into the oceans, and that's changing the oceans.
And that's the oceans facing extinction that we talked about in the teaser?
Yeah, and this is another new study that bluntly warns humans are on the brink of causing a mass extinction event in the oceans.
This is so much fun, I don't know what to do with myself.
Well, it's published in the journal Science. It's the first to combine multiple lines of research into one comprehensive analysis. The researchers point to the expansion of industrial fishing, pollution, seafloor mining, which is just now getting started, and ocean acidification caused by the burning of fossil fuels.
So what was that glimmer of hope that you had promised all of us at the beginning?
Yes, there is some good news. There is still time to repair the damage. One of the researchers told the New York Times, quote, "We are lucky in many ways. The impacts are accelerating. They're not so bad that we can't reverse them."
You mean if we get to work and Congress takes action and we take care of these problems?
Yes.
Yeah, not such a glimmer of hope there, Des.
But I have more.
I don't know if I can take any more.
No, this is good news. The solar industry, for example, is booming. A new solar industry jobs report says that more people are employed by the solar industry now than by the oil and gas drilling industry, and that solar jobs now outnumber coal jobs.
Okay, so there's that. I'll take it. That's about all the joy we've got for today, isn't it?
Sorry.
For much more joy, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download us anytime via TuneIn, Stitcher, or iTunes. And find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters, where Desi will cheer you up at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of the team. Everything is awesome when we live our dream.
There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today.
Oh, let's not forget Charter Schools USA, Concordia. Let's not forget the big Education Incorporated. Let's not forget them. No, can't do that. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. You know, during the President's State of the Union address, talked a lot about free college, talked a little bit about inequality, and it's about damn time. Because for years I've been saying what we need a tax code like that socialist president. You know, that socialist president, Dwight David Eisenhower. Top marginal tax rate, 92%. And you tell people that in their head, you just see that there's like a rattling sound inside between their ears. I can't believe it. Oh, that would be no, because we've been trained as a nation to believe that we can't do those things. It's never been done, never. And you look to what built this country, the fact that we had a well-funded education system where you could go as far as your skill could take you. You know, and I think back to friends that I've known over the years. One who went to college during the Eisenhower years and one who went to college during the Nixon years. And they walked out of college with no debt. The idea of a student loan then was really kind of foreign. You worked, you worked a part-time job if you had to, and if you got the grades, you stayed in. It was funded. You could get money, especially under the GI Bill. And yet today, you kind of not so much. I was shocked today by a number put out by the Keystone Research Center that Pennsylvania has. Congratulations, Pennsylvania students. You're number 3, the third highest average student loan debt in the nation, $31,675 for a 4-year degree. Now, if you want to go on for more, obviously, pile on top of that, considering grad school is much more expensive as you continue forward. But you throw us in, and I guess the reason, and this is interesting, the reason why we're 41st in the number of working adults with more than a high school education and 48th in investment per capita in higher education. Is it any wonder that our students are third highest in debt? Is there any wonder? Because, I mean, right there, the fact that we're at the bottom of the investment chart, at the top of the debt chart, you could just, how many people took Economics 101, where you learned about the X? As one thing goes up, the other goes down. As our investment in education goes down, the debt and the cost to everyone else goes up. I've been saying for years, and when I first started saying it, people were going, no, Rick, you're crazy. That could never happen. The American people would never allow it. Right now, as we speak, they're working to make an entire city school district private. They're working to hand it over to a for-profit private company going, here, take it. As that multiplies, and trust me, if it's allowed to stand, it will. As that happens, we end up in the same boat, K through 12, that we're in for higher ed, where the state keeps pulling back, and either parents or students are going to have to make up the rest. Trust me, this is coming. And I know it may be your grandkids, and maybe you don't care about your grandkids. That's their problem. They shouldn't have them to begin with. But we're going to move to this era where, much like higher ed, you want your kindergartner to have full day kindergarten, you're going to have to pay for it. And what that's going to do, again, it's going to create that two Americas that John Edwards talked about. Either you can afford education or you can't. And we're going to move right back to where, because everything's cyclical. Everything comes back around every 100 years or so. And the wheel's turning. We're, just like the, what was it I was reading about today? The doomsday clock. That they're talking about moving the doomsday clock one more tick towards midnight. Because evidently we're 5 minutes to midnight on the doomsday clock. That once it hits midnight, it's all over. End of the world. Same kind of thing here. You're moving that one step closer to two very distinctly different systems. And it's not surprising. Again, it's not surprising that a state that doesn't invest in it ends up having students that are saddled with massive debt. I like to use a teabag frame because the teabaggers used to use this all the time on me. Rick, you're talking about redistribution of wealth. Yeah, that's what this is. Stop and think about it for a minute. 48th in investment per capita in higher education. 48th. And our students are third in the amount of debt. Do we see that? I don't think it's that hard to figure out. Do you? I know I don't. But the Keystone Research Center put out a study today. They point out that the wealthiest 1% of Pennsylvanians have taken home all of the total increase in income in Pennsylvania in the current economic recovery. They've taken it all. And I saw one of these graphs, and again, back to economics 101, where when one side goes up, the other has to go down. Basically from the end of World War II, really the 1970s, until now, you've seen the wealth of the middle class go from 70% of all income to actually taking negative new gains out of the income. We've been stagnant and declining for a generation, and it's just remarkable as the pendulum swinging, the wealth swinging away from the people who created and into the hands of those who don't. And as KRC points out, incomes for 99% of us, basically all of us, except for those handful, since 2009 have fallen. They say as inequality has grown, education beyond high school has increasingly become necessary, although not sufficient, to obtain jobs that pay here in Pennsylvania. So you stop and you look at this stuff and you go, seems like free college tuition wouldn't be a bad idea. Which is why the Republicans are wholly and completely and totally opposed to it. So there you go. Congratulations is what it is. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk.
To the last of us, fight till we die. To the keys of the kingdom are mine. All stand together for the world to see. Now the time is right to live out all our dreams. Say the words forever. Your strength will never leave. Want to win the fight, say I believe.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. President Obama delivered his State of the Union address yesterday. Obama did make some foreign policy announcements, like this appeal in the fight against the Islamic State.
And tonight I call on this Congress to show the world that we are united in this mission by passing a resolution to authorize the use of force against ISIL. We need that authority.
But overall, Obama left out important details about how a number of pressing foreign policy issues will be approached in the coming months. The Islamic State was singled out as a terrorizing menace, but Al-Qaeda or Yemen? No mention. On Cuba, Obama was upbeat about the mutual benefits of improved relations, but on the topic of his democratic expectations for the island, he said only that negotiations would, quote, stand up for democratic values. The president dodged the Middle East peace process, mentioning Israel only once in the context of Iranian nuclear talks, and Palestine, not a word. Obama made no mention of Boko Haram or how to stop the group. In fact, he only mentioned the continent of Africa twice and made no reference to individual countries. But for all the foreign policy nuance missing from the speech, Obama did dust off the issue of climate change and allude to the role he intends to play ahead of global climate talks in December.
I am determined to make sure that American leadership drives international action. In Beijing, we made a historic announcement. The United States will double the pace at which we cut carbon pollution, and China committed for the first time to limiting their emissions. And because the world's two largest economies came together, other nations are now stepping up and offering hope that this year, the world will finally reach an agreement to protect the one planet we've got.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
McDonald's is scrambling, and I'm not talking about eggs.
You know your business has what image consultants call quality perception issues when you have to launch a PR initiative that publicly addresses such questions as, does McDonald's beef contain worms? Thornier yet for the world's largest burger machine is its boneheaded response to the remarkable ongoing rebellion by fast food workers who are demanding a $15 an hour wage and the freedom to unionize without corporate retaliation. McDonald's responded by, guess what? Retaliating. Big Mac managers illegally reduced the hours and therefore the pay of hundreds of those who joined the Fight for 15 campaign. And many managers also spied on workers, interrogated and threatened them, and imposed restrictions on their freedom even to talk about unions or working conditions. The corporation now faces federal charges on hundreds of labor law violations, as well as facing rising consumer anger over its ham-handed tactics. Naturally, McDonald's responded by apologizing and raising wages. Ha, just kidding. Instead, it's running a new series of TV ads that, astonishingly, tries to tap into people's emotions about such tragic events as 9/11, as well as linking its logo to people's positive feelings about veterans, birthdays, and even love. McD's corporate marketing director explains that the ads are all about the golden arches shining brightly in every community, being with us through the good and the bad. As she puts it, who better to stand up for loving than McDonald's? This is Jim Hightower saying, huh? She should ask protesting workers about the love they're getting from McDonald's. Oh, to be fair, the bosses did make one change for workers, new uniforms, supposedly to buff up the corporation's public image. That's not just boneheaded, it's pathetic.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Controls the past now, controls the future, controls the present now, controls the past, who controls the past now, controls the future, who controls the present now, now testify.
So the question is, how do we get there? How do we get in this situation with the education, and how'd you get in this situation where we've handed out so much in wealth, and we've handed out so many tax dollars to corporate special interest and not investing in education and roads and all that? How'd that happen? I argue it happened because too many of us dropped out of the, I don't want to vote. It's a headache. I remember when I was younger, it was, I don't want to be called for jury duty. And they changed that years and years ago to where just if you have a driver's license, it's not based on voter registration. And I'm not even sure if it ever was based on voter registration, but it was a common misconception of the time. For me, though, it comes down to voting. And I've always said, and it's interesting to me, I've always said that, we've out-procreated the wealth class. We should be able to impose our thoughts on them, like good schools and safe communities and, all kinds of stuff, regulations that workers won't be killed on the job, stuff like that. Strong social safety net that most people believe in. You think you could get that, right? It's amazing to me how many people that I come across who say, no, I don't participate. And there's part of me that even thinks that, the Nixon strategy, the Nixon Southern strategy, still at play today, where we've divided people based on race. And many of us would like to believe that's not the case. I got to think on the far right wing. Yeah, I got to think that's part of it. Anyway, while the president talked about voting in the State of the Union address, there's some problems coming up because, as you may remember, last year there were a number of the southern states who evidently moved ahead without their pre-clearance to change how things are done. And right now, what you've got is you've got a couple of Democrats who are saying, hey, we need to restructure and resurrect the 65 law, the 1965 Voting Rights Amendments law, that the Voting Rights Act law that says, you got to have pre-clearance before you change things if you're one of these states that has a history of poll taxes and blocking the ballots and stuff like that. The history of shenanigans. And they're, chances are not going to pass through a Republican-controlled Congress. And I look at this, and there's part of me that says, go back to 2000, and you look at all of the shenanigans that went on in 2000, all of the the hanging Chad and all that stuff. But even before people were elected, even before the first ballot was cast, some 80,000 people in Florida were thrown off the voter rolls, all because Jeb Bush, who's now running for president, who's not going to be running for president, hired a company called ChoicePoint to go and purge the voter rolls. So anybody's name who sounded like somebody else's name, who may have been possibly a felon, or maybe in years to come, we think you're going to commit a felony, they got booted off the voting rolls. And there were a large number of people. And not surprisingly, there were a lot of black names, which is why, numerous times we've had Greg Palast on the program, the guy who broke this story. I had to do it in Britain because we can't talk about that stuff here. But nonetheless, he laid it out, document after document, proving that basically Florida was stolen. Our entire democratic process was stolen, and it's the Bush is at the center of it. And you go, oh, but Rick, that sounds conspiratorial. No, this was a well thought out plan. They knew Florida was going to be one of the 2 or 3 states that could swing the election one way or another. They knew that if you could get those black people off the rolls, it'd be close enough to kick them off. They knew that. And then they came out with the Help America Vote Act. Remember that? So they started doing that. Then came caging, which is another beautiful right-wing thought, where we're going to send out letters to everybody, and if you don't call in or return them, you're just thrown off the voter rolls. Knowing that most people are busy, maybe it gets lost in the mail, maybe whatever. You're off the voting rolls. And now they give us provisional ballots. You don't think all of this stuff is well thought out, well planned, systematically devised to make sure that everyone doesn't have access to the ballot box? Do you not think that? And then you go through with all of the ALEC pieces of legislation about voter ID and all of this, which I got to be honest, I'm not against the concept of an identification. You have to identify yourself in one way, shape, or another. But to have a narrowly described number, this is it. This is all you can have. You can have nothing else. Knowing that most people, especially most poor people, don't have the resources, don't have the ability, and maybe don't even have the travel ability to be able to do these things. I mean, when I registered to vote, I remember all I needed was a utility bill. My electric bill with my name and my address on it was enough. But then again, this was Ohio, and this was a lot of years ago, almost 30 now. So when you put these roadblocks in the way, what's the point? Obviously, the point is to suppress the vote. And it's not new. Does it take a rocket scientist to figure this stuff out? You don't need to be a Richard Vogel fan. You don't need to be a Paul Weyrich fan, who Paul Weyrich himself, speaking to 20,000 Baptist ministers in Dallas, Texas, said, how many people want everyone to vote? He goes, I don't want everybody to vote. Quite candidly, our power goes up, our leverage goes up as the voting populace goes down. Basically saying, us on the radical religious right, if we can keep those other people, we can suppress them, our power becomes greater. And it doesn't take a genius or a mathematician to figure that out. The fewer number of people voting, the more power each vote has, which is why they pull all of these stunts, which is why they put all of these roadblocks in place, because they know they can then impose their will on poor places, which is how we end up with an education system where our college students are saddled with massive debt, which is why we end up with cities like Philadelphia and the York City School District basically broke and basically sending our teachers to the streets. It's amazing stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
I see them blue. me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more...
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. As he surveys the state of the union in America, AFL-CIO Executive Vice President Tafari Gebre sees reason for hope and optimism. He says movement activists can reignite labor's fire despite constant orchestrated attacks on labor power. Gebre was able to grow the labor movement in conservative, Republican-dominated Orange County, California, and he says labor can begin to grow again in unlikely places like the South, but it means labor will have to build up its organizing and political infrastructure in the South.
Not only labor, but the entire progressive movement has abandoned the South for years. Meanwhile, we're going to run campaigns while building the infrastructure and practically making it being tested by fire.
Gebre says that labor has chosen 5 model southern cities to begin building up its labor councils: Dallas, Houston, Miami, Atlanta, and Orlando. Gebre says the emerging new face of the labor movement for fast food workers, taxi drivers, immigrants, and young workers is an exciting, positive labor story. As that movement emerges, he says, labor can't give up on politics, but it must put more effort and resources into strengthening labor at the local level, mobilizing members in communities.
We need to go back to what we're good at. That is investing in our communities, investing in our neighborhoods, and having a year-round political program targeting voters instead of elected officials. That's what I think we need to do, is reorient ourselves and get back to a year-round politics, year-round organizing.
1,300 workers at the Hunts Point Market in the Bronx have ratified a new labor agreement, with 97% voting yes. Daniel Kane Jr., president of Teamsters Local 202, says it's the best wage and benefits package for the workers in 2 decades. Hunts Point is a huge produce market serving most restaurants and grocers in New York City. A Republican amendment that repeals the Jones Act could endanger U.S. jobs. U.S. Senators Tammy Baldwin and Bob Casey say that goods shipped between U.S. ports are required to be carried on U.S.-made, owned, and operated ships. The GOP amendment ends that requirement. The senators say that it puts thousands of U.S. shipbuilding jobs at risk. The U.S. shipbuilding industry employs more than 400,000 people, generating $36 billion in annual gross domestic product.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned and represented Bank of Labor, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. Bank of Labor offers a business Visa card with no annual fee and points earned with every purchase, as well as rental vehicle and travel accident insurance. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
This newscast made possible in part through support from the United Mine Workers of America. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
When you can't shut out the sounds of the truth, lock your feet, I got the rest. So I can't raise my fist. You can't kill the protester. You can't kill the protest. You can't murder the rebel.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So my kids tell me we're coming up upon the standardized test season. And as I do every year, it's important to talk about. I'm not a standardized test fan. In fact, my kids, I'm going to be opting them out. Here in Pennsylvania, you have to do it under religious grounds. So as I've always said, every religion has the ethic of reciprocity, do unto others. So that's my angle on it. But beyond that, I just think they're bad tests. I don't think they're any way, shape, or form a telling of what my kids know or don't know. And when you're going to give me the results a year later, I have a problem with it. But I saw this article over in the City Paper written by Dan Denver, and I said, you know what? This is a good time to start talking about the dreaded PSSAs. Daniel, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, I look at this and, I guess we're moving right back into cash test season. with these standardized tests. And I'm starting to see the organizing going on, and I really enjoyed your piece.
Thanks.
That points out that 17% of students at one of the schools that you cited, they've opted their kids out. Mine, I think there's one or two other parents in my school district. So it looks like this is something that's actually gathering some momentum.
Yeah, this is a movement that's taken off across the country in recent years in response to the growing stakes of standardized tests, which are not only used to evaluate students' progress, but to judge the success or failure of particular teachers and even entire schools. And that's led to a lot of controversy. Teachers and parents and students have complained that it's led to a narrowing of the curriculum as ever more time is spent to prepare students for these tests, which, leads to non-tested subjects and thus deemed less important subjects like art and music are increasingly left on the side. According to parent and teacher activists in Philadelphia, 17% of students at Feltonville School of Arts and Sciences, a Philadelphia middle school, have been opted out of the test by their parents, which is a pretty huge number.
I mean, that's an enormous number considering, most of the last year when I was looking for results, most school districts had maybe 1 or 2% at best. 17 seems very high.
Yeah, when I wrote about this last spring at the beginning of PSSA standardized test season, it seemed like a pretty vocal but small number of parents who began agitating and organizing against standardized tests and had opted out their kids. This year, it seems like it's growing quite a bit. It's unclear to what degree this is going to be replicated at other schools in Philadelphia or other parts of the state, and it's unclear to me so far what the impact will be, but it's certainly evidence that the movement has gained steam.
Do you think the more people realize what's going on and take a look at the length of testing? Because when I told someone the other day that we're talking 2 solid weeks I think there are 13 days of testing that go on just for these standardized tests. I think most people go, wow, that's a bit excessive.
Yeah, I think that a lot of parents, students, and teachers do find it excessive. And their point, I don't think, it's not that students should not be assessed, but once you tie high stakes to these tests, instead of assessing where students are at, you provide incentives for teachers to dedicate a growing portion of the school year to preparing for these tests, which, as you said, the testing themselves is taking up a huge number of days. So that really sets up a perverse set of incentives for teachers to teach to the test. And not only that, also to cheat to the test. In Philadelphia and across Pennsylvania and in districts around the country, most notably Atlanta,
right,
there have been huge scandals of teachers and administrators cheating on standardized tests. And obviously there's no excuse for doing that. But while these teachers and administrators have been criminally prosecuted, there has not been as much attention on policymakers' part paid to what appear to be the underlying causes for these cheating scandals, which is the very high stakes tests themselves.
Yeah, I know. I remember my daughter was my oldest daughter was in 5th grade. And they were coming up on the PSSAs, and she was play teaching with her younger brother and sister. And I heard, I couldn't believe what was coming out of her mouth. It was, you've got to pay attention. You've got to pass these tests, because if we don't pass the test, they're going to take money from the school, and the schools are going to be closed down. And it just seemed like that had to be beated into her head for it to come out that smoothly and that as a matter of factly.
Yeah, I think that's what teachers feel like they have to do, even though most that I've spoken to, I mean, I think I've yet to ever encounter a teacher who thinks that high stakes standardized tests are a good thing. So there's this huge gulf of opinion between policymakers making education policy and the teachers who actually educate children. But in the current education policy climate, it's almost as though the less experience someone has in education, the more credible their opinions about education are, because there's just this incredible hostility to not only teachers' unions, but teachers, and sort of disparagement of them as the root causes of the educational problems.
So now, when you talk to like the district spokespeople, what kind of responses do you get out of them? I mean, because I got to be honest, the districts, it's not their fault either that they're stuck in this situation, that they have to administer, that they've been, it's come down from above on them as well, that they've got to impose these tests. What kind of responses do you get from them?
Well, when I spoke to the school district of Philadelphia earlier this week about what appear to be a large number, apparently 90 parents opting their kids out at Feltonville, the district said that, one, they had not yet received the opt-out letter, so that they couldn't confirm that was the case. But what the district spokesperson did say is that he would find it disturbing if a teacher was going around targeting special ed and English language learner students to opt out. The teacher he appears to be referring to, who I quote in the piece, Amy Rote, who's a high-profile teacher and union activist at the school and in the district, responded that that teachers working together with students and parents on issues like this is exactly what they should be doing. So there seems to be a pretty big difference of opinion between the district and standardized testing critics of what the sort of legitimate means to approach this are. And under Pennsylvania law, I believe it's Pennsylvania law, but there has to be a religious rationale for the exemption.
Yes.
It seems to me that parents opting their kids out are certainly, maybe stretching the notion of what a religious rationale is, but the district has never challenged that in the past.
Nor can they. Nor can they. When you say that, because look, that's what I let in within this piece is, every religion has the ethic of reciprocity, that whole do unto others thing. So that's basis enough. But the sad reality is our legislature, that's all they've given parents. The sad reality is that's the only avenue that our legislature has given us to be able to stop our children from this kind of abuse.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure some parents do have religious rationales, and how you construe what is a legitimate religious rationale and what isn't, I think is something probably that neither the school district of Philadelphia nor any school district is really eager to litigate. So I don't imagine that they'll be challenging individual parents' rationales for opting their kids out of standardized tests. But if this movement does continue to grow, it will put the whole standardized testing regime, I think, into a bit of a pickle, because if you don't have participation of most students, it really further calls the accuracy and legitimacy of the assessments into question. Right. And once that happens, I think that it just means that this is going to be a huge debate.
Isn't that the point? Isn't that really the point of the opt-out movement? To get this back into the hands of parents to debate the rationality and the really the necessity of these tests. And look, as a parent, I've explained this to my kids. I am definitely not opposed to testing. I'm all in favor of diagnostic testing. We learned this week. Let's see what you know. And next week, if you didn't get it, we'll work on it so you do get it. I'm all in favor of that. But tying the future of the school, tying the future of my kids' opportunities based on these 13 days of really high pressure tests just seems to me to be idiotic.
And in recent years, despite the growing criticism of high stakes standardized testing, instead of legislators in Pennsylvania, instead of policymakers in Pennsylvania, instead of rolling them back, have actually only increased the number of standardized tests. Now there are the Keystones, which are a requirement for graduation. And this at a time, Keystones were introduced at a time that Governor Corbett had cut I think about $860 million to K through 12 public education. So I think especially in Philadelphia and low and middle income districts in the state, there's sort of this bizarre sensation of this demand being leveled that students make ever greater marks on these standardized tests, while the funding for the teachers that are supposed to be giving them the educations that are being assessed is being slashed.
Right.
So it's really a bizarre situation.
And really tied to the outcome of these tests, which then sets up a situation, as you pointed out, in Atlanta, where you've got administrators and teachers going, our future is based on these kids passing these high stakes tests, which some of them, I've talked to some people who just, I don't want to take the test. I Christmas tree the test. They basically draw a Christmas tree on the test. So you're tying these teachers' futures to kids who are going, I'm not going to pass it anyway. I've been told I'm a failure. It's never going to happen. I have a problem with the whole structure of it.
Yeah, and I think the entire structure is based on a rhetoric that has been ascendant for the last decade or more that finds fault with teachers as the root cause of problems in American public education. But when you take a step back, there's not really a crisis in American public education as a whole. A lot of affluent and middle income districts do a very good job by most accounts educating their students. The big problems are really in low income districts that get a whole lot less funding to educate students living in poverty who have a whole lot greater need. And what we have is not an American public education system in crisis. What we have is an American public education system that is segregated, unequally funded, and as the civil rights movement that we were reflecting on this past Monday would have put it, separate and unequal.
Exactly. And the thing that gets me, and I've been saying this for a while, the profiteers are coming into these districts, because I've always believed, and it may sound conspiratorial, Daniel, but I've believed from the beginning that this whole structure was set up so that the schools that you've described could be labeled failures. You can take the money away from them and make them even more failures, so that the profiteers in the private schools and the charters and all those can come in and take over. And oddly enough, we don't see them taking the same number of standardized tests, which is just kind of weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, there is, this is all part of a self-described reform movement program that does see high-stakes standardized testing as a manner through which you can identify the schools that are to be deemed failures, that are then to be closed or turned over to private charter management. And there is a kind of big debate over what motivates the reform movement. There are certainly people out to make a buck off of the privatization of public education. But I also think, on the other hand, that there is a serious ideological thing at play, where a lot of supporters of school reform and privatizing public education truly believe that, have a libertarian, outlook on the world, and truly believe that's the best outcome. Obviously, parents like the 90 parents that apparently have opted their kids out of standardized tests at Feltonville and throughout the Philadelphia public school district, where this has been just a roiling controversy for years, disagree with that. In Philadelphia, over the last more than a decade, since the 2001 state takeover, we've really sort of been turned into a laboratory for free market inspired educational reforms. And I think that education reform advocates would be very hard pressed to argue that their reforms have been a success. Things have definitely gotten worse in Philadelphia under the state takeover.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's been a laboratory of everything not to do. And this is why I'm glad that people like you and the city paper pay attention to this stuff. And I'm glad to see that there's organizing going on. And I know you'll spend more time writing on this, and we'll be bringing you back on to talk about it.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Daniel Denver of the City Paper. You want to take a look at the article? Go to thericksmithshow.com. Click on Daniel's name. Take you right there. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Still open, but man, it's slow. The tip jar's light and the register's low. The bartender don't have much to say. The regular crowd gets thinner each day. Some are maxed out all their credit cards. Some are working 2 jobs and living in cars. Minimum wage won't pay for a roof, won't pay for a drink. If you gotta have proof, just try it yourself, Mr. CEO. See how far $5.15 an hour will go. Take a part-time job at one of your stores. I bet you can't make it here anymore.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1890. Miners from a number of smaller miner unions gathered in Columbus, Ohio, to consolidate their ranks and form the United Mine Workers of America. During that first convention, the newly formed UMWA adopted a constitution barring discrimination based on race, religion, or national origin, as UMWA founders clearly recognized the destructive power of division. The United Mine Workers became a national leader in the fight for union rights in the United States. The union has been led by such significant voices of the common man as John L. Lewis, John Mitchell, and Mother Jones. The Constitution, adapted on this day in labor history, begins, "There is no fact more generally known, nor more widely believed, than that without coal there would not have been such grand achievements, privileges, and blessings as those which characterize the 19th century civilization. And believing, as we do, that those whose lot it is to daily toil in the recesses of the earth are entitled to a fair and equitable share of the same." The UMWA pledged to use all honorable means to maintain peace between ourselves and employers, adjusting all differences as far as possible by arbitration and conciliation, that strikes may become unnecessary. With their constitution in place, the United Mine Workers stood at the forefront of many national struggles for working people. They helped to lead the charge for the 8-hour day in the 1890s, then were a powerful voice to secure collective bargaining rights in the 1930s. While a powerful and influential member of the American Federation of Labor, the UMWA was a major force behind the founding of the Congress of Industrial Organizations. The CIO helped to organize nearly 4 million new workers in industries such as steel and automaking in the 1930s. Through its principles and policies, strength and unity, the UMWA has been an inspiration to generations of working families for more than 100 years.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing some White House history and how the Oval Office developed into what it is today. Teddy Roosevelt's wife, Edith, wanted all the second floor of the White House to be a private residence, which resulted in the construction of the West Wing and ended the use of the Oval Yellow Room as an office. Then President Taft built the official Oval Office on the south side of the wing. Franklin Roosevelt later created today's modern Oval Office by enlarging it and moving it to the southeast corner of the West Wing. But after all that, what's the big deal about the office being oval anyway? The only one of our U.S. presidents that never occupied the White House was our first, George Washington. But he may have had the biggest influence on the president's office being oval-shaped. Join us again next time for George and an Architect. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Exposing GOP hypocrisy. The Rick Smith Show.
He's a crime. He's a crime. I want it all. I want it all. I want it all.
You know, really, it is. It's that hypocrisy, really. When you look at the public schools saddled with these tests and these charter schools and the private schools and the wealth class school, they don't have the tests. That's the amazing thing to me. You know, the people who've saddled this on our kids, and I truly believe changed the entire focus of education. You know, I've gone to parent-teacher conferences where I've gone, you know, my daughter's getting a B- in math. I'm not thrilled. Oh, don't worry. She'll pass the PSSAs. And I'm going, why do I care if she's passing a test she's not going to take? I want to know she actually knows it. Look, I know that myself, I was not a good test taker. You would have sat me down for 2-3 hours to take a test. My mind, especially at that age, would have wandered, and I would have been one of the people Christmas treeing the test. And for those who don't know what Christmas treeing the test is, it's basically just filling in all the bubbles to make the answer card look like a Christmas tree, or drawing whatever, or bubbling in your name, or whatever it is. Because you're going, I've been sitting here staring out the window for an hour and a half, and it needs to be done. So we'll pick B. B, the answer for everything. To me, these tests, honestly, they, in my view, have never. I felt the same way about the ACTs when I took them. Back when I was going out of high school, going into college. Another wasted high-stakes test. Now imagine, think about this for yourself. For those folks who have taken those kind of the SATs, the ACTs, those entrance kinds, the LSATs, all of those. Imagine doing that every year. Imagine every year, you got 13 days of this nonsense. And it's the focus of everything that you're learning. The focus is, okay, this is going to be on the test, so you're going to want to know this. And understand, this is a foreign concept to the vast majority of people, especially my age. Who, when I went to grade school, I think we took the Iowa Basic Test of Skills, which was, I think it was 2 days. I think it was 2 hours, 2 days or something like that. And it was just basically, let's just throw it out there. There was no pressure put on it. There was the funding of the entire school district is in your hands. There was none of that. And you know what? We learned. It was amazing. My mindset is, why are we teaching a kindergartner to fill in bubble tests? It's insane to me. Now, look, I've said this 100 times, and I'll say probably 1,000 times more. I'm not against testing. I remember the nuns every week, in the mimeograph, cranking the mimeograph off, getting the tests out and getting that ink all over your fingers. We were tested all the time. All the time. But it was right there. The next day, bang, here's what you got on the test. Here's what you didn't know. Go home and write 100 times, whatever it is you didn't know, so that you came back the next time and you knew it. I'm all in favor of that. Last year, when I opted the kids out, I asked the principal, I said, let me ask you, let's say they take these, when do I get the results? Because I just had it in my, when do I get them? Well, you'll get them at the beginning of next school year. Now, this is March, April. I'm going to get them in 7 months? Really? In this digital age, in the age of everything here right now, this very second, I got to wait 7 months to get them? Really? And the answer is yes. The other part of this that bothers me is the huge amount of taxpayer dollars that goes into funding these corporations who have made 2+2 proprietary information. You're not allowed to see the tests. Now, when I opted the kids out, you have to go in, just so you know the process. You have to actually go in. They give you the testing material. You get to look at it. You got to sign a waiver, a sheet saying that you'll never talk about it. It's like Fight Club. You can never talk about test. Can't say what's on test. You'll be sued. They'll come and they'll take your last drop of blood. So you have to sign this thing that if you're going to look at the test, you have to look at it, that you're not going to tell anybody what's on it. Sworn to secrecy. And in fact, if I remember right, the principal had to stand outside the window and look in at me, because maybe she couldn't even see it either. I'm not sure. So I look through it and I go, yeah, it's it looks like any really long, very long standardized test. And I said, I have this, the ethic of reciprocity. I believe in you don't do to someone else what you wouldn't want them to do to you. So that's my religious, because my religion believes in that. That's my exemption, even though I'm infuriated that I have to use that. I should be allowed to say, it's just stupid. Stop it. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of my kid's education. But that's, neither here nor there. So when you do this, you look at this and it's angering. All of the complete change. And I got to tell you, I'm glad to see. I am glad to see that there's some organizing going on. Thrilled. Maybe some other folks will join in too. Maybe some in my district. Quick break, right back.
Fighting till the end, and we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
The weather and climate that you've grown up with is not going to be the weather and climate you're going to experience or your children are going to experience.
Confirmed again. 2014 breaks the record for hottest year.
Headline in the New York Times, ocean life faces mass extinction. Is that bad?
Yeah, that's bad. More new studies warn human impacts threaten our life support systems. Plus,
any glimmer of hopefulness in all this?
A glimmer of hopefulness in all this.
There better be. All of those glimmers and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
My religious beliefs are one of many things that inform me that we couldn't have any impact on the climate, the planet, the globe, creation, no matter what, no matter how much we wanted to.
Oh, thanks for that, Rush Limbaugh. Very persuasive. This is your Green News Report.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there.
Okay, Desi Doyen, the climate change deniers, since the news came out last week from NOAA and NASA, that I know you're going to talk about it in a second, the climate change deniers seem to be besides themselves. They don't know what to think. They're making stuff up. They're claiming, NASA says they're not really sure 2014 was the hottest year. It's kind of amusing to watch. Were it not really kind of scary?
Yeah, it is kind of scary because they're doing everything they can to stop any kind of climate action policy from being implemented.
And that's what this is really all about, trying to defend the fossil fuel industry. And that's whether some of these dopes realize it or not. Okay, tell us, Des, what is it that all these right-wingers are now flipping out about?
Okay, it is confirmed. 2014 was the hottest year in recorded history for the planet since record-keeping began in 1880. That is according to both NASA and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, confirming previous findings by the Japan Meteorological Agency. The long-term trend of rising global temperatures is undeniable, according to Gavin Schmidt, director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, here on PBS NewsHour.
What we're seeing is a long-term trend that is producing record warm year after record warm year. And we can attribute those changes mainly to the increase in greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide, that we've been putting into the atmosphere. And so we have a fingerprint of change that's associated with human activities, and that fingerprint fits the evidence that we're seeing in the data.
And of course, just to point out to the deniers that even though the eastern U.S. had a really cold winter, the western U.S. and the rest of the world saw record warmth. 5 months last year all had all-time new temperature records, and the oceans were also record warm around the world. But wait, there's more. An international team of researchers warn that humanity is, quote, eating away at our own life support systems at a rate unseen in the past 10,000 years.
Oh, aren't you just little Miss Smiley? Nothing but good news today.
Yeah, sorry. These two major new studies measure humanity's impact, and they warn that we're pushing the boundaries of the planet's life support systems in 4 areas. Those 4 areas are climate change, biodiversity loss, nutrient pollution from fertilizers, and ocean acidification.
And the studies warn that we are losing on all 4 of those fronts?
Yes. For example, they say that we use 8 times more fertilizer than we used in 1950, and a lot of that is running into the oceans, and that's changing the oceans.
And that's the oceans facing extinction that we talked about in the teaser?
Yeah, and this is another new study that bluntly warns humans are on the brink of causing a mass extinction event in the oceans.
This is so much fun, I don't know what to do with myself.
Well, it's published in the journal Science. It's the first to combine multiple lines of research into one comprehensive analysis. The researchers point to the expansion of industrial fishing, pollution, seafloor mining, which is just now getting started, and ocean acidification caused by the burning of fossil fuels.
So what was that glimmer of hope that you had promised all of us at the beginning?
Yes, there is some good news. There is still time to repair the damage. One of the researchers told the New York Times, quote, "We are lucky in many ways. The impacts are accelerating, but they're not so bad that we can't reverse them."
You mean if we get to work and Congress takes action and we take care of these problems?
Yes.
Yeah, not such a glimmer of hope there, Des.
But I have more.
I don't know if I can take any more.
No, this is good news. The solar industry, for example, is booming. A new solar industry jobs report says that more people are employed by the solar industry now than by the oil and gas drilling industry, and that solar jobs now outnumber coal jobs.
Okay, so there's that. I'll take it. That's about all the joy we've got for today, isn't it?
Sorry.
For much more joy, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download us anytime via TuneIn, Stitcher, or iTunes. And find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters, where Desi will cheer you up at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of the team. Everything is awesome when we live in a dream.
In the end, Wall Street, with Obama, Duncan, Bloomberg, Walcott, and Goldstein as its agent, they want to turn public education into private, profitable businesses. They hope to impose factory regime of managerial control over educators' working conditions and our students, our children's learning conditions.
As I've been saying for years on this program, you've got to take back public education. It's the hill that the middle class, the working class of this country has to die on. You go back, you learn the labor history and how much it took to get compulsory education, to make sure every kid had a shot at a good quality education. I got to tell you, you should go back and read the history of this, because then I think maybe we would be more vested in actually defending it from those sitting in our capitals, those elected officials, and those big moneyed interests that want to privatize and profitize it. So much is riding on this, and this opt-out movement that I've been really promoting for some time now is, I think, the beginning of that. Engaging parents, organizing parents, because I think the more they find out how much this testing takes up of the day, how much focus it is of the school year, I think they become enraged. This is not the elementary school that I went to just 30 some years ago. This is not the high school that I went to. It's not. Things have completely changed, which is why I'm glad to see that there are parents and teachers who are organizing and speaking up against it. One of the teachers who is organizing and speaking up, I got Amy Road on the line. She's a teacher in the Philadelphia School District, also one of the leaders of the Caucus of Working Educators. Amy, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on, Rick.
I look at these standardized tests, and for me, I came to it probably late in the game. My fifth grade daughter was, play teaching with my other two kids, who are younger than her, saying, you've got to pass these tests. If we don't pass it, they're going to take money from the school and they'll close the school down and we'll have nowhere to go. And I'm going, what? Where'd that come from?
Well, that is the rhetoric. And I think that children hear it clearly. I don't hear teachers in my school saying that, but I've certainly heard principals say it. And I certainly have heard that in staff development meetings, that it is just so all important.
Yeah, I mean, because
and the kids definitely, they're smart. They pick up on it.
No, because here's the thing, and I've been saying this for a while. This isn't my generation's kindergarten. This isn't, what I think a lot of parents remember of their K through 12 years. I don't think this is it at all. And I think we like to think things are just the way they are. They're not.
No, they're not. And I've been a teacher for 20 years, so we're probably about the same age. And this isn't the way it used to be, and it isn't just a couple hours of testing every spring. It has become a monster. It is so time consuming. It is such the focus, and it's just kind of taking the democracy out of education.
And I would argue taking the professionalism out of your profession, if you will, turning it basically into factory work where we're just stamping out little widgets, opening the little heads up and pouring in something, and then next. That's the way it seems to me.
I agree. I think we spend too much time on focusing on the test and less time on the art of teaching and making real personal and emotional connections to kids to just move them on a little further. I know when I got into teaching, I was inspired by a number of my teachers, and what I wanted to do was just help kids learn a little bit more every day, and absolutely, of course, take care of them and be kind to them. And this atmosphere does not really allow for that.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I've actually seen that myself too often. But here's the thing that gets me. I mean, we've basically made these tests, and understand, I was a horrible test taker as a kid. The SATs, the ACTs, all of those. I didn't have the attention span. So I think a lot of people right from the beginning, they're at a disadvantage right from the start because they're probably not good test takers to start with. I can't imagine the stress and all of that goes on to these kids over, hey, if you don't do well, we're going to take money and close the school down.
Yeah, I think that's something important to point out, that sometimes if you do well on a standardized test, it means you're good at taking standardized tests. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're really, really good at the content. Some kids can't handle working in isolation. They can't handle the length of the test. They get nervous. They get upset. So it isn't always a good indicator of what they really know. And I know our kids, especially our ESOL students and our special ed students, they get so stressed because they want to make us happy and they want to do well. Who doesn't? And the duress that we're putting them under. Some kids cry and scream. They put their heads down. I've had experiences with kind of intermediate ESOL students where they beg you to help them, and I have to say no and turn my back. I mean, last year when I was administering these tests, I was basically on the verge of tears for days.
Wow, that's got to put you in
it's just cruel.
That's got to put you in a really tough situation because I would have to think, your belief is, and I'm not speaking for you, but your belief is I got to help these kids. And then being in one of those situations where you're basically the enforcer more than the teacher, that's got to be difficult.
Yeah, I feel that one of the most important things that I teach middle school is building relationships and trust, and it takes time to do that. And then I feel that it gets undone when you throw them these really difficult tests. And for ESOL and special ed kids, they don't match up with their ability, so they are very difficult. It just breaks that trust. And I feel terrible about that. And maybe people say, well, as a teacher, you shouldn't be feeling anything. Well, I definitely think I should feel something about my students and about our relationship.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I don't know who's telling you that, but I want my teachers to have a connection with my kid because they spend actually more time with them than I do.
Yep.
And I hate to admit that, but that's the reality of the system.
That is the reality. And I have to say this one thing, and that even discussing that standardized tests are not good for kids and parents should consider opting them out is a taboo subject. It is very, very difficult to even get teachers to talk about it in private. it is harrowing because it is, in this generation of teachers, it is everything.
Yeah.
And I think just kind of that fear that teachers have of even talking about maybe no is very real, and it's been ingrained in us. And I don't think that parents want a woman or man standing in front of their children feeling fearful and feeling like, I got to toe the party line, or I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to get in trouble, or I'm going to look bad. I don't know who wants a fearful person standing in front of their child. I think we should feel like free to do our very, very best.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's, we're not.
And that's one of the things that's kind of frustrating as well, is I want that teacher empowered to do their very best and not be fearful that all these kids are going to fail this test, and that now we tie some of it to raises and compensation, and then I think you set up a situation of really a breakdown situation. I look at Atlanta that Daniel Denver talked about earlier, where they were cheating and the teachers were changing the test because it's tied to their compensation and to the school funding. It just seems like a bad concept from the start.
It really does. I mean, I want to be fairly compensated, and I want to have decent benefits, and I want to have some control over my workday. I don't want a bonus. I don't work on Wall Street. We can't businessify education. It's
Right.
just not the same thing. And I think opening things up to bonuses and money really does, especially if someone's financially vulnerable, can open things up to cheating. I mean, I've said very publicly that I think that any teacher that cheats on these tests, the full force of the law should come down upon
Absolutely.
them, because it's the law, but also because you're giving these tests validity by taking it that seriously. A lot of the principals that cheated, they were motivated by money. They do get a bonus. Teachers don't, and we really, really need to keep it that way.
I'm right there with you. But you said something there that caught my attention, having some control over your workplace. And my oldest daughter's in 7th grade. So in the 7 years that I've been involved with the school, my local public school, because we go in and we read to the kids and we do a whole bunch of things in the classroom when they allow us. I've known of several teachers who have retired basically because of that they've turned the school day into it's bang, 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 bang. You're doing a reading for 16 minutes at this time, and you're doing this for 18 minutes at this time, and it's very regimented, and there's no time for that flow of, hey, things are going well, let's keep this going, and not a lot of time for play. I've seen school districts who are doing away with recess for 3rd and 4th graders. It just seems insane to me.
It really does. We're in middle school, and we do try to get our kids out to play. We have a very nice courtyard. And they don't need as much play as little ones. I do agree we should never, ever eliminate recess. And I do believe it's much more regimented and scripted. Not completely, but much more regimented than it was, say, even 15 years ago. And it's all because it's this narrowing towards the test. You have to ask this style question, and you have to spend this kind of time on task, and you have to be, it's all kind of subtly or not so subtly geared towards that test. And this is something really important I think parents in Pennsylvania need to know. No matter who cares what I think, it's really what parents think.
Right.
Is that 2 years ago in New York State, they're going through what we're going through now, and that they're changing the standardized test. And 2 years ago in New York State, the scores dropped by about 30% because they very intentionally made them more difficult. And parents need to start questioning cut scores. The Department of Education determines who is in what category. There's 4 categories: advanced, proficient, basic, and below basic. But it's not scientific how they determine who falls into what category. It is determined by the Department of Education, a person, not by actual science or data. And these things can be statistically analyzed, and they're not. And no one ever has to account for that. And they've made it so much harder. And if you have seen the release items, you'll know this, that your child is not going to do as well as you think they're going to do. Even a kid who's advanced on the PSSA,
right?
They may not be getting an advanced score.
Yeah,
and it's all meant to fool everyone into thinking that, wow, our kids aren't getting a good education, so ... we need to privatize.
Yeah, isn't that when someone had asked Arnie Duncan about that, and he came up with some quip of, well, this will make the yuppie white soccer moms wake them up to the reality that their kids aren't as brilliant
Yes.
as they think they are.
And that was so condescending and out of line. Arnie Duncan, however, is a hack. He is not a professional educator. Never has been, never was. Everywhere he goes, he wreaks havoc. And I'm horrified that the Obama administration has doubled down on him and his ideas. And I think people really, really need to think about that, about why a person who was basically put the Chicago school district in turmoil is now the number one ed guy in the country. I also think it's interesting the right and left can really join on this idea. The federal government needs to get out of the way. They're causing a lot of these problems,
Certainly.
and they're making a lot of these mandates, and are unfunded.
Correct. So we're not a big fan of the Common Core then.
You know what? I don't like the way it's implemented. I mean, I could be a fan of standardized testing if it was implemented properly. I could be a fan of the Common Core maybe if my school could afford to buy the materials. We're working on some textbooks in our building that are 9 or 10 or 12 years old.
Wow.
How can I possibly do well on a test? We don't have the materials.
So let me ask you last line of questioning, and I guess it's just kind of a personal thought thing. Is my assessment that these tests are put into place for districts like in Philadelphia and the York City School District and Duquesne and the Chester Upland and all the rest of them, specifically designed to label them failures so that they can be shut down as the Broad Foundation would have us do and implement charters and the for-profit model?
I think you're accurate. I would just call it a giant money grab. There's a professor in New Jersey, and her name is Lois Weiner, and she has written some beautiful books about this and researched it very carefully. And she says this whole idea that American schools are failing is just a smokescreen. And this idea that you and I agree on, that this is all a money grab, it's not a conspiracy because conspiracies are done in private. This is a public plan. It's organized by hedge fund managers, profiteers, real estate developers, and the corporate test makers. It has nothing to do with the quality of education. And the public schools in this country that are suffering and are having trouble educating the kids is because the kids are in jeopardy, and everybody knows what their problems are, but they don't want to fund it.
And it's easy to say, well, that's just Philadelphia or York City. It's not going to happen to us until it does. And that's
until it does.
And that's why I keep saying, what's good, the laboratory right now is places like Philadelphia, places that have high poverty rates and a high number of minorities. But eventually, it will cross this Commonwealth and this country if we allow it, which is why I give you the utmost credit for standing up and having the courage to speak out. I greatly appreciate it, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
It would be my pleasure. Thank you very much, Rick.
Amy, thank you so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. President Obama delivered his State of the Union address yesterday. Obama did make some foreign policy announcements, like this appeal in the fight against the Islamic State.
And tonight I call on this Congress to show the world that we are united in this mission by passing a resolution to authorize the use of force against ISIL. We need that authority.
But overall, Obama left out important details about how a number of pressing foreign policy issues will be approached in the coming months. The Islamic State was singled out as a terrorizing menace, but Al-Qaeda or Yemen? No mention. On Cuba, Obama was upbeat about the mutual benefits of improved relations, but on the topic of his democratic expectations for the island, he said only that negotiations would, quote, stand up for democratic values. The president dodged the Middle East peace process, mentioning Israel only once in the context of Iranian nuclear talks, and Palestine, not a word. Obama made no mention of Boko Haram or how to stop the group. In fact, he only mentioned the continent of Africa twice and made no reference to individual countries. But for all the foreign policy nuance missing from the speech, Obama did dust off the issue of climate change and allude to the role he intends to play ahead of global climate talks in December.
I am determined to make sure that American leadership drives international action. In Beijing, we made a historic announcement. The United States will double the pace at which we cut carbon pollution, and China committed for the first time to limiting their emissions. And because the world's two largest economies came together, other nations are now stepping up and offering hope that this year, the world will finally reach an agreement to protect the one planet we've got.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
McDonald's is scrambling, and I'm not talking about eggs. You know your business has what image consultants call quality perception issues when you have to launch a PR initiative that publicly addresses such questions as, does McDonald's beef contain worms? Thornier yet for the world's largest burger machine is its boneheaded response to the remarkable ongoing rebellion by fast food workers who are demanding a $15 an hour wage and the freedom to unionize without corporate retaliation. McDonald's responded by, guess what? Retaliating. Big Mac managers illegally reduced the hours and therefore the pay of hundreds of those who joined the Fight for 15 campaign. And many managers also spied on workers, interrogated and threatened them, and imposed restrictions on their freedom even to talk about unions or working conditions. The corporation now faces federal charges on hundreds of labor law violations, as well as facing rising consumer anger over its ham-handed tactics. Naturally, McDonald's responded by apologizing and raising wages. Ha, just kidding. Instead, it's running a new series of TV ads that, astonishingly, tries to tap into people's emotions about such tragic events as 9/11, as well as linking its logo to people's positive feelings about veterans, birthdays, and even love. McD's corporate marketing director explains that the ads are all about the golden arches shining brightly in every community, being with us through the good and the bad. As she puts it, who better to stand up for loving than McDonald's? This is Jim Hightower saying, huh? She should ask protesting workers about the love they're getting from McDonald's. Oh, to be fair, the bosses did make one change for workers, new uniforms, supposedly to buff up the corporation's public image. That's not just boneheaded, it's pathetic.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Look around, they're moving in. Hold the ground when they begin. We can do it, we can do it, and if they wanna, they can try, but they'll never get here. Then they can get out of here. Gonna keep on driving, never stop. United, 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 we stand.
I gotta tell you, if only every school district here in the Commonwealth had a teacher in every classroom like Amy, I think we'd be a lot better off. And just real quick to wrap up the whole opt-out thing. And look, you have the ability, and I want to make it very clear. If you think, as I do and many others, that these standardized tests are way too far over the pale, that we want to get back to educating kids to be critical thinkers and not just bubble filler-inners, that we actually have some experiential, hands-on learning kind of stuff instead of 13 odd days sitting in a classroom going, I got this test, and if I don't pass it, I'm going to not get money. Then get your kids out of it. Take the system, take the data away from them. Take the numbers away from them and make them come up with something that's better. Is this the best we can do for our kids' future? Really, honestly, is this the best we can do? I don't think so. I think we can do much better, and I expect much more from our politicians, much more from our administrators, much more from our teachers. But the sad reality is we're creating a culture where in a very short period of time, there's no going back. Understand, as Amy pointed out, this isn't how it's always been. We've changed things quite rapidly, and rapidly to the point to where now teaching to the test, doing all this stuff, it's the norm. When a parent says, I don't think a B- is good enough, their fears are allayed with, don't worry, they'll pass the test. Sorry, not for me. Quick break, right back.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. As he surveys the state of the union in America, AFL-CIO Executive Vice President Tafari Gebre sees reason for hope and optimism. He says movement activists can reignite labor's fire despite constant orchestrated attacks on labor power. Gebre was able to grow the labor movement in conservative, Republican-dominated Orange County, California, and he says labor can begin to grow again in unlikely places like the South, but it means labor will have to build up its organizing and political infrastructure in the South.
Not only labor, but the entire progressive movement has abandoned the South for years. Meanwhile, we're going to run campaigns while building the infrastructure and practically making it being tested by fire.
Gebre says that labor has chosen 5 model southern cities to begin building up its labor councils: Dallas, Houston, Miami, Atlanta, and Orlando. Gebre says the emerging new face of the labor movement for fast food workers, taxi drivers, immigrants, and young workers is an exciting, positive labor story. As that movement emerges, he says, labor can't give up on politics, but it must put more effort and resources into strengthening labor at the local level, mobilizing members in communities.
We need to go back to what we're good at. That is investing in our communities, investing in our neighborhoods, and having a year-round political program targeting voters instead of elected officials. That's what I think we need to do, is reorient ourselves and get back to a year-round politics, year-round organizing.
1,300 workers at the Hunts Point Market in the Bronx have ratified a new labor agreement, with 97% voting yes. Daniel Kane Jr., president of Teamsters Local 202, says it's the best wage and benefits package for the workers in 2 decades. Hunts Point is a huge produce market serving most restaurants and grocers in New York City. A Republican amendment that repeals the Jones Act could endanger U.S. jobs. U.S. Senators Tammy Baldwin and Bob Casey say that goods shipped between U.S. ports are required to be carried on U.S.-made, owned, and operated ships. The GOP amendment ends that requirement. The senators say that it puts thousands of U.S. shipbuilding jobs at risk. The U.S. shipbuilding industry employs more than 400,000 people, generating $36 billion in annual gross domestic product.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned and represented Bank of Labor, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. Bank of Labor offers a business Visa card with no annual fee and points earned with every purchase, as well as rental vehicle and travel accident insurance. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
This newscast made possible in part through support from the United Mine Workers of America. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The man who sends the investor class diving through their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
At every trough you stop to feed. With your arrogance, your ignorance and greed. Now here come the cuts and redundancy. Through the absolute indifference, the avarice, incompetence, your arrogance, your ignorance, your greed.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Big news today down in Virginia. A lawsuit was filed in U.S. District Court for the Western District of Virginia. 10 workers from McDonald's stores there in the Virginia area, they have filed a suit that the company evidently fired them for working while black. And evidently someone actually said that there are too many black people in the store. And that to me is just mind-blowing in this day and age. And good, I'm glad that there's a lawsuit. I'm here to talk a little bit about this and really this whole culture of being able to just get rid of workers for no reason. I've asked Shadeh Gebrselassie, who's a senior attorney with the National Employment Law Project, to come talk with us. Shadeh, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having me, Rick.
I look at this and great. Finally, someone's going to hold McDonald's accountable, or one of these employers accountable. To be honest, not loving it.
Not loving it. Right. I mean, this is a case, though, just to give your listeners a little background, this is a case where 10 workers have filed a lawsuit, 9 African-American former employees, 1 Hispanic former employee, alleging that not only were they, ultimately fired for being black, essentially, alleging that the store owner said that he wanted to make sure the ratios were equal, that there were more white employees and less black employees. But before that, they have brought allegations of really horrific racial and sexual harassment in the store. And I think what is significant about this lawsuit is not only that it's raising, allegations that, if true, are egregious, but that the workers are suing not just the individual franchise owner, so that one store down in Virginia, but they're also suing McDonald's corporate as well. So they're suing the corporate headquarters and saying that they're just as responsible for these violations as the individual store owner.
On a bigger scale, just beside these 10 workers, I think that is extremely important to break up this system that's been allowed to be set up, where you've got this big behemoth corporation who claims no responsibility for what happens to the employees that wear their name on their shirt. I mean, FedEx being another one, McDonald's, all of these independent contractors, these franchisees, someone has to be held accountable.
That's right. I mean, this is, this franchising system is kind of the core operating model in fast food. Roughly 90% of McDonald's restaurants are franchises. And, as you noted, it's typical, these types of employment, outsourcing, contracting out type relationships are typical in our economy. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that per se. But what these lawsuits are saying, and not just this one, but previous ones that have been filed against McDonald's alleging other workplace violations, is that, the corporate franchisor, the corporate parent, can't exercise so much control over these stores and get so much profit from the operations of these stores, and then completely disclaim responsibility and wash their hands of it whenever there's any sort of violation, right? They can't have it both ways.
No, I mean, I looked at it, and there's a suit going on with Wendy's, as I understand it, that they're suing one of the franchisees for not upgrading their stores. And you go, if they have that kind of control to tell the guy who owns it that, you have to have a different sign out front, and you got to do it now.
Right.
They should have some responsibility to the workers and raising their conditions as well.
That's exactly right.
I mean, and the thing that gets me is it's taken so long for this to come to light. They've been getting away with this since I was a kid.
Right. I mean, I think yes, and I think one of the reasons why it has come to light so much over the last couple of years is because there has been a groundswell of organizing activity among fast food workers across this country. Right. These lawsuits, both the one filed today and previous ones that have been filed around, retaliation for trying to organize or wage theft. Those are just part of this overall. What we're seeing in the fast food industry over the last couple of years, which is, thousands of workers going on strike repeatedly in hundreds of cities, exercising their right to come together collectively and protest their wages and working conditions, actually winning concrete policy victories like a $15 an hour minimum wage for all workers, not just fast food workers, in places like Seattle and San Francisco, and really, laying bare what is happening in the industry, that, corporations like McDonald's are enjoying record profits. Meanwhile, their workers are, making minimum wage, near minimum wage, never getting raises. These are workers that are adults, not kids.
Begging the
So I think
taxpayers for subsidies.
Exactly. And so I think that's been a real reason why these types of practices have been coming to light so much more, perhaps, in the last couple of years.
Yeah, the other part of it, I think you hit on there a second ago, is that these aren't teenagers. When I was a kid, the fast food restaurants really were those teenager jobs because, there were manufacturing jobs. We hadn't completely deindustrialized. And this is the low wage work that are now people's. This is their livelihood. They're no longer teenagers getting that first job. This is their career.
That's right. I mean, 70% of fast food workers in this country are over the age of 20. About a third of them actually have some college education, and many of them are supporting families. And I think the fact that the age, that fast food workers are majority adults really speaks to what you flagged, which is how our economy has really shifted. I mean, we have lost a lot of those decent paying jobs in manufacturing, construction, et cetera, and many of them are not coming back. So where are the jobs that are growing in our economy? They're in, low wage service sector industries like fast food, like retail, many of the industries where we're also starting to see, seeing a lot of organizing. And so I think what does that mean for us, as an economy, is that if we, we are supposedly in a recovery, and people, if you read the papers, you hear that it's robust, but it will not be a truly robust and meaningful recovery for millions of American workers that are making such poverty wages and are going to be making poverty wages unless something changes in the future.
Yeah, and again, I go back to my hope for President Obama when he took office in 2009, which is that he would return the reward of work, which means giving these employees the ability to negotiate and not have to go begging for health care or food stamps or for the school lunch programs for their kids. That their work would actually be how they supported themselves, and that you would restore that dignity and reward of work.
That's right. I mean, dignity and reward of work, and building a broad-based shared economic prosperity that actually helps not just those workers that you're talking about, but helps our economy as a whole. I mean, I think one of the reasons why the fast food strikes have taken off so much in the last couple of years is that people are starting to see the real tangible effects of what happens when people don't have a voice in the workplace, not just for those workers, but for labor standards as a whole. I mean, when we were in the 50s, 60s, when we were at 35% unionization rates, that was something that boosted labor standards more broadly across our economy and made it so that working people, really had the money to do things like buy a house and send their kids to college and do, the basic things that everybody should be able to do. And I think as more and more adults are spending their careers in these very low-wage jobs, and as more and more middle-class Americans are falling because these are the only jobs that are available, there's a growing recognition that something has to be done to, rectify the imbalance in the workplace that's, really accelerated over the last decade.
I'm right there with you. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with today Gebra Shalazi. She's a senior attorney with the National Employment Law Project. If you want to take a look at their information, just go to thericksmithshow.com. Click on Shaday's name. It'll take you right there. In looking at this, I keep going, people like me, people who don't work in fast food, we have to be involved in this as well. How do we make sure, how do we help? How do folks who aren't involved get involved?
Well, I think a lot of it, one is, something very, very basic as, joining the next protest when it happens. I think, a lot of what, even though this is a movement, to raise wages in the fast food industry and, hopefully, a union and building worker power, there are concrete policy aims that are part of this. So, raising wages, like working, letting your voice be heard in terms of what you think your politician should do around raising the minimum wage, or things like that. I think it's all really important.
But don't you know, if we raise the minimum wage, it'll kill jobs. It's a job killer, don't you know?
Right, exactly.
It's the end. If these people who work at these jobs, if they were to make a decent living, the whole system would collapse.
Right,
and the billions of dollars that big fast food makes, it wouldn't be enough.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? It's exactly. It's like looking at the profits that these corporations are enjoying. I mean, a McDonald's posted, I think, $5.6 billion in profit last year, and more broadly, we're at a place in our nation's history where the gap between the very wealthy and working people is the largest that it's been in decades, and so there is. Raising the minimum wage is just one very small effort to kind of correct that gap and give people money to spend at stores so that those stores can stay afloat.
So that people can
that's
buy.
the opposite of a job, yeah.
So you can
Opposite of a
get
job
the people who work there can buy a Happy Meal.
Exactly.
I mean, we talk about other countries not being able, the people working in factories and sewing clothing and doing all these things, not being able to afford the products that they make. I got to be honest with you, it's not cheap. And if you work there, you can't buy a Happy Meal. I think there's a problem with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Sad stuff. So I'm looking forward to this lawsuit. What's the timetable on this going forward? What do you see coming up in the coming weeks and months?
So I think the lawsuit was just filed today. Defendants have have an opportunity to file their answer, and then it works its way through the federal litigation process. So there will be discovery. There might be efforts to settle, and if it doesn't settle, it goes to trial. And I think in terms of timing, you never. It really varies depending on many different factors. So it's hard to give a particular timeline.
But this is a good thing in my view, and I think the more we can hold these franchisees and of course the overarching mother company accountable, I think the better things get for everyone.
Yep, I agree.
Because if you raise the bottom, everyone else comes with it. I think that's just common sense.
Yes.
Simple stuff. Shade, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Rick.
All righty. Shade Gebrselassie, she's a senior attorney over at the National Employment Law Project. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
One of these days we're gonna wake up and find a new day. One of these days we wanna wake up and make a new way. One of these days.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1890. Miners from a number of smaller miner unions gathered in Columbus, Ohio, to consolidate their ranks and form the United Mine Workers of America. During that first convention, the newly formed UMWA adopted a constitution barring discrimination based on race, religion, or national origin, as UMWA founders clearly recognized the destructive power of division. The United Mine Workers became a national leader in the fight for union rights in the United States. The union has been led by such significant voices of the common man as John L. Lewis, John Mitchell, and Mother Jones. The Constitution, adapted on this day in labor history, begins, "There is no fact more generally known, nor more widely believed, than that without coal there would not have been such grand achievements, privileges, and blessings as those which characterize the 19th century civilization. And believing, as we do, that those whose lot it is to daily toil in the recesses of the earth are entitled to a fair and equitable share of the same." The UMWA pledged to use all honorable means to maintain peace between ourselves and employers, adjusting all differences as far as possible by arbitration and conciliation, that strikes may become unnecessary. With their constitution in place, the United Mine Workers stood at the forefront of many national struggles for working people. They helped to lead the charge for the 8-hour day in the 1890s, then were a powerful voice to secure collective bargaining rights in the 1930s. While a powerful and influential member of the American Federation of Labor, the UMWA was a major force behind the founding of the Congress of Industrial Organizations. The CIO helped to organize nearly 4 million new workers in industries such as steel and automaking in the 1930s. Through its principles and policies, strength and unity, the UMWA has been an inspiration to generations of working families for more than 100 years.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing some White House history and how the Oval Office developed into what it is today. Teddy Roosevelt's wife, Edith, wanted all the second floor of the White House to be a private residence, which resulted in the construction of the West Wing. and ended the use of the Oval Yellow Room as an office. Then President Taft built the official Oval Office on the south side of the wing. Franklin Roosevelt later created today's modern Oval Office by enlarging it and moving it to the southeast corner of the West Wing. But after all that, what's the big deal about the office being oval anyway? The only one of our U.S. presidents that never occupied the White House was our first, George Washington. But he may have had the biggest influence on the president's office being oval-shaped. Join us again next time for George and an Architect. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Minimum wage. Yeah!
You know what it means when they pay you minimum wage? You know what they're trying to tell you is like, hey, if I could pay you less, I would.
That's kind of the view of California Congressman, Republican Congressman Tom McClintock, who he spent a little time on C-SPAN's Washington Journal talking about Mitt Romney potentially becoming a presidential candidate again, and Romney's support of a minimum wage being at least $10.10 an hour. And McClintock basically said, I'd never vote for him. The minimum wage is too high already. And I loved the quote saying, now look, I've always been one to believe, and I think the vast majority of Americans believe if you work 40 hours, you play by the rules, you work hard, you do that, you should be able to at least support your family, at least exist, right? Bare minimum basic survival, at least. I don't know how you do that on 725, to be honest with you. Given the rents and given the electricity and all of that stuff, I don't know. Unless you just think, maybe you just be cold all winter. I don't know. But the good Republican said of the minimum wage, it's not supposed to support a family. The minimum wage is that first job when you have no skills, no experience, no work history. Now understand, you talk to these people who've been working for McDonald's for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and have never gotten a raise. Some of these low wage retail stores, some of the low wage work that we've allowed to happen because they have no bargaining power. There's no, even with the gaining of experience, there's no moving forward. He goes on to say, that's how you get into the job market. That's how you develop that experience, develop that work record, get your first raise, then your next raise, then your promotion. And I'm going, maybe that's how it works in the corporate upper ladder of the corporate. But the low wage workforce, they're pretty much screwed. He says, if your labor is an unskilled person, just entering the workforce is worth, say, $7 an hour at a job, and a minimum wage is $10. You have just made that person permanently unemployable. The first rung of the economic ladder has been ripped out, and you can't get on it. That's a tragedy. And I wholly disagree. If you raise the ladder up, if everyone's playing on the same platform, that first rung is still the first rung. And I love this idea that if we raise the minimum wage, it's going to destroy all the jobs. Everything's over. Yet no one can point to any actual fact that that's the case. It's a myth of belief. It's what the right wing wants us to believe because it sounds plausible. Oh, yeah, if we raise the minimum wage, then they're going to lay people off. And so let's say they do. Let's think about this rationally for, I don't know, an eighth of a second. Let's say the fast food restaurant down the street, minimum wage goes up to $10 an hour. They evidently can't afford $10 an hour. So they lay off all the people. Who's giving you the hamburger? No one, Rick. They're going to go out of business. No, they're not. The guy who owns the place isn't going to let it go out of business. He's got everything tied up in it. And he's fat and happy. He's loving it. He's actually loving it. The workers, not so much. What's going to happen is they'll raise the price of a hamburger a penny or two here or there. And based on the volume of what is sold, that's how the raises will be paid for. That is just common sense. One of those really bright economist people said that if you raise the price of like a pair of socks at Walmart like 3 cents, everyone could have health care because of the sheer volume that they sell. At some point, we have to stop and think about this stuff. And we just do. I mean, and we've got to stop buying this right-wing narrative of, well, it sounds plausible. So if it's going to kill all the jobs, and this is one of those things that caught my attention this morning. If raising the wage to $10 an hour is going to kill all the jobs, the first rung will be ripped from the ladder. Then why has the Senate in Montana? Why have they voted? Why are they proposing an increase in their minimum wage up to $10.10 an hour? Last time I checked, Montana wasn't a hippie liberal state, and I understand Montana still has a minimum wage right at the federal level. What they're saying is over the next couple of years, starting in 2016. No, actually, I think Montana has a little bit over the federal raise. I think they're like 80 cents up. I think they're like $8.05 an hour. But they're saying in 2016, under what they're saying, the minimum wage would rise. And then it would be adjusted to inflation. Something I said back, I don't know, the last time it was raised here in Pennsylvania, 2006. Why can't we tie it to inflation so it isn't eroded away? Look at what happened during the Reagan years. All the horrible stuff that happened during the Reagan years. One of them, and one of the worst ones, aside from taxing unemployment benefits, a massive slap in the face to all those people who lost their jobs to outsourcing, is he's the only president out of office. There are only two presidents who haven't raised the minimum wage since 1935, Ronald Reagan and, of course, right now, Barack Obama. But in that 8-year span, you saw the minimum wage basically eroded. There was nothing there. And inflation kept going up. The costs of gasoline, the cost of food, the cost of shoes, the cost of clothing, cost of everything kept going up, 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 and up, and up, and up, and up. What didn't go up? The wages for the folks at the bottom. And what does that do? That acts like an anchor around the neck of the minimum wage, which pulls everyone else down too, which is why we've had stagnant wages since the Reagan era. And I would argue why we have not seen an increase in wages since Obama's taken office. We've actually seen a sliding backward. And why we've seen so much of the wealth that's been created since the Great Recession in the hands of so few. Because the wage structure is basically sunk like a rock. Understand, if you're making $10, $12, $15 an hour, you're stagnant too, because that guy at the bottom is holding us all down. If we raise him up, guess what happens? There's a reverberation effect. And everyone ticks up just a little bit, which means a good thing for the economy because most people spend pretty much everything they bring in, which to me is good for the economy. But the really smart people, like Mr. McClintock, they don't quite see it that way, which I got to tell you is quite frustrating. Now, you look at the numbers in Montana. They claim in Montana, nearly 13,000 workers there in the state, 2.9% of the entire workforce receive less than the $8.05 minimum wage that I guess just went into effect. That means because of the minimum wage increase at the first of this year, you saw nearly 13,000 people get a raise. You raise that up higher, you continue to see that adjustment. And you know what's good for the employers? It's good for employers because it gives them certainty. They know, hey, it's going to go up a little bit next year. We got a plan for that. Makes good business sense. And it's just smart to me. So here in the next coming days, I guess next week, there's going to be a big rally to increase the minimum wage here in Pennsylvania, raise the wage. PA, they're going to be coming to Harrisburg. We'll be spending a lot of time next week talking about the minimum wage, talking to minimum wage workers, and saying, I want to know how you get by. Honestly and truthfully, I want to know how someone making less than $300 a week is making ends meet. Because I don't know. I really don't, especially if you've got children. Have no idea. Anyway, let's take a quick break. Right back after this with Talk Radio News Service. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We chase the best calls from the basement please stand still. This is a fading American dream. I got no time now to go and cry now. Before I take a job, come on the dance floor. I'm just searching for my dignity. This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The weather and climate that you've grown up with is not going to be the weather and climate you're going to experience or your children are going to experience.
Confirmed again. 2014 breaks the record for hottest year.
Headline in the New York Times, ocean life faces mass extinction. Is that bad?
Yeah, that's bad. More new studies warn human impacts threaten our life support systems. Plus,
any glimmer of hopefulness in all this?
A glimmer of hopefulness in all this.
There better be. All of those glimmers and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I'm just my religious beliefs are one of many things that inform me that we couldn't have any impact on the climate, the planet, the globe, creation, no matter what, no matter how much we wanted to.
Oh, thanks for that, Rush Limbaugh. Very persuasive. This is your Green News Report.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there.
Okay, Desi Doyen, the climate change deniers, since the news came out last week from NOAA and NASA, that I know you're going to talk about it in a second, the climate change deniers seem to be besides themselves. They don't know what to think. They're making stuff up. They're claiming, oh, NASA says they're not really sure 2014 was the hottest year. It's kind of amusing to watch, were it not really kind of scary.
Yeah, it is kind of scary because they're doing everything they can to stop any kind of climate action policy from being implemented.
And yeah, and that's what this is really all about, trying to defend the fossil fuel industry. And that's whether some of these dopes realize it or not. Okay, tell us, Des, what is it that all these right-wingers are now flipping out about?
Okay, it is confirmed. 2014 was the hottest year in recorded history for the planet since record keeping began in 1880. That is according to both NASA and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, confirming previous findings by the Japan Meteorological Agency. The long-term trend of rising global temperatures is undeniable, according to Gavin Schmidt, director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, here on PBS NewsHour.
What we're seeing is a long-term trend that is producing record warm year after record warm year. And we can attribute those changes mainly to the increase in greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide, that we've been putting into the atmosphere. And so we have a fingerprint of change that's associated with human activities, and that fingerprint fits the evidence that we're seeing in the data.
And of course, just to point out to the deniers that even though the eastern U.S. had a really cold winter, the western U.S. and the rest of the world saw record warmth. 5 months last year all had all-time new temperature records, and the oceans were also record warm around the world. But wait, there's more. An international team of researchers warn that humanity is, quote, eating away at our own life support systems at a rate unseen in the past 10,000 years.
Oh, aren't you just little Miss Smiley, nothing but good news today?
Yeah, sorry. These two major new studies measure humanity's impact, and they warn that we're pushing the boundaries of the planet's life support systems in 4 areas. Those 4 areas are climate change, biodiversity loss, nutrient pollution from fertilizers, and ocean acidification.
And the studies warn that we are losing on all 4 of those fronts?
Yes. For example, they say that we use 8 times more fertilizer than we used in 1950, and a lot of that is running into the oceans, and that's changing the oceans.
And that's the oceans facing extinction that we talked about in the teaser?
Yeah, and this is another new study that bluntly warns humans are on the brink of causing a mass extinction event in the oceans.
This is so much fun, I don't know what to do with myself.
Well, it's published in the journal Science. It's the first to combine multiple lines of research into one comprehensive analysis. The researchers point to the expansion of industrial fishing, pollution, seafloor mining, which is just now getting started, and ocean acidification caused by the burning of fossil fuels.
So what was that glimmer of hope that you had promised all of us at the beginning?
Yes, there is some good news. There is still time to repair the damage. One of the researchers told the New York Times, quote, "We are lucky in many ways. The impacts are accelerating, but they're not so bad that we can't reverse them."
You mean if we get to work and Congress takes action and we take care of these problems?
Yes.
Yeah, not such a glimmer of hope there, Des.
But I have more.
I don't know if I can take any more.
No, this is good news. The solar industry, for example, is booming. A new solar industry jobs report says that more people are employed by the solar industry now than by the oil and gas drilling industry, and that solar jobs now outnumber coal jobs.
Okay, so there's that. I'll take it. That's about all the joy we've got for today, isn't it?
Sorry.
For much more joy, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download us anytime via TuneIn, Stitcher, or iTunes. And find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters, where Desi will cheer you up at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of the team. Everything is awesome when we live in our dream.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
I gotta tell you, that Everything is Awesome song, I despise. I absolutely despise that song. I think it was in the Lego movie, if I'm not mistaken. I had to take my kids to go see that, and I hated it then, and I think I hate it even more now. So I hope they'll never use that again. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Speaking of everything awesome, evidently the California Public Health Department is urging people who are going to Disney theme parks to not go if you haven't been vaccinated. Evidently, they've had a large number of people, I guess 70 cases of people who have visited the Disney theme parks who have come down with the measles. Because evidently, maybe the only thing I can think of, it was homeschooling week, and all the anti-vaccinating homeschool types were heading off to the theme park while everybody else was in school, and now they're sick. That's the only thing I can think of. So they're basically saying, hey, if you haven't, stay home. And I'm of the mindset, if you haven't been vaccinated, stay home. Last thing I need is my kid to get sick because you've given them a strain that they're not vaccinated from. Just a thought. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. I got Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how's it going? Great to be here.
I appreciate you taking time. So, hey, before we get into today's news, State of the Union, were you there?
Yes, I was. I was in Statuary Hall that evening. We didn't have Ted Nugent this year, so it wasn't as fun as last time around. But, what are you going to do? The guy who invited him last time was, not surprisingly not reelected. So there we go.
You lie!
Actually, it wasn't even that one. That guy's still around.
I know.
This was Steve Stockman, who, for some reason, decided to run for Senate and then didn't campaign at all. And literally at all. Wouldn't tell reporters where he was going to be. Never really showed up to any public events. Just raised money. And that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
And then left Congress when he didn't win. So he's gone now.
Good. Bye. So anything exciting? I mean, you're never going to get near the Ted Nugent story, but you had to come in contact with somebody that was at least mildly interesting, right?
Well, actually, I ran into the old state senator from California, from where I went to college in Merced. He ended up getting elected to Congress. This is Representative Jeff Dunham. So he's now representing Merced and Modesto, which is where I went to UC Merced. And back in college, when I was sort of a long-haired miscreant, he used to come to our campus from time to time, and I would sort of taunt him because he was the, sort of local Republican figure. And a couple of nights, me and my friends would, go drinking and steal his campaign signs and change them from denim to Duckham back in our garage. And from time to time used those for when we were running for, school offices and whatnot as protest candidates. So I ended up interviewing him and told him about how we would steal his signs back in the day. And, he seemed amused for the most part, which is probably one of the better reactions that I could have hoped for, considering I was, pretty much telling him that I created a grotesque level of theft against him.
Yeah, I gotta ask you though, what's the statute of limitation on that?
I don't know. I
Probably should have checked that
before I mentioned it.
Probably should have checked that out, because here in Pennsylvania, if you get caught stealing the signs, it's a pretty big deal.
No, I mean, it certainly is. It wasn't like the best idea. If I was somebody who had good judgment when I was younger, or even today, I probably wouldn't be in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. See, now I have taken signs like that, but it was after Rick Santorum and Ron Paul and all of the ones from the 2012 New Hampshire primary lost. So I grabbed some of their signs on them just as things to go, can you believe this? That's it.
No, and I understand that. And, I've always made it a, clear point of mine never to take campaign signs based on, who it is, because I want to be all high and mighty and respect people's beliefs. My neighbors had a Ron Paul sign for way too long up in their driveway. Didn't touch that despite, some very strong desires on my part. But for this one, it wasn't that he was a Republican. It was just that his last name was
close.
4 letters off from mine. So it was pretty easy to fix in the garage. And so I made a rare exception.
Good for you.
If he was a Democrat, I would have done the same thing.
There you go. Good for you. All right, let's find out what's going on. Evidently, the House last night trying to ban abortions after 20 weeks.
Yes, this was legislation to ban abortion after 20 weeks. And it was scuttled after a number of Republican women ended up pointing out that the exceptions in it for victims of rape and incest only applied to those who reported the instances to the authorities. There was also some discussion over whether or not the exemption for incest was sufficient enough, considering it only applied to those who were under 18. There's a good number of people who noted that, incest situations take place in, a wide variety of, instances. So that was felt to be a little bit too limiting. So as a result, the Republicans decided to pull the legislation before Democrats and those against it could rally together to, push against it. And as a compromise piece of legislation, they introduced a bill that would effectively ban federal funding for abortions, which is frankly something that's been done a number of times. That was something that was passed in the 70s under the Hyde Amendment. It was something that was codified under the Healthcare Reform Act. And, it was never really that big of a threat in the first place.
Yeah, but, it's a nice way to raise money.
Oh, no, it certainly is. And you have to put this in context of what's going on in D.C. this week. We're seeing the March for Life. So all around the talk radio news offices today, we've been seeing a large number of pro-life protesters taken to the street. Most of which I'd say are probably, under the age of 16, which is
interesting
to watch. But so that was essentially a move for them to be able to go to those rallies that are being held this week, to kind of face the faithful as they gather, and to be able to brag that they did something to undermine women's reproductive rights and are therefore still fighting for, that issue to them. So once it was scuttled, the 20 weeks bill, they had to have something to sort of save face, and the federal funding one was sort of the low-hanging fruit for them.
There you go. But I got to be honest and understand abortion is not an issue that I follow closely. I am pro-choice, but I'm pro-choice and would prefer that it not happen. I think we should be helping people want to bring children into this world by making sure that they get health care and education and they're fed and all of that stuff. But I actually thought that you couldn't get an abortion after 20 weeks.
I believe that's on a state-by-state basis to a large extent. I'm not actually positive on that.
Okay.
I believe the way it stands right now, it's not codified in federal law. Nevertheless, it's, I agree with you when you're saying that it should be something that's, rare but legal. And I think a good way to help make it rare would be making lives easier for pregnant mothers through, maybe sick leave or raising the minimum wage or, anything else that the president proposed during Tuesday night's State of the Union address, I guess.
Yeah, and maybe contraception. Maybe stop it before it even happens, which just blows my mind that they're against the Plan B, the morning after pill, which you just said you don't have this problem. It just blows my mind. But not surprising. Not surprising.
Yeah,
at all.
I also saw a gentleman wearing an NRA hat and a pro-life sticker during today's march, which I usually, when I'm wearing a press pass, I have to keep a straight face. I'm not really allowed to say anything or get into confrontations. But that was a little bit too much for me, and I got into a little bit of a hissy fit with him.
Yeah.
But that's life, I guess.
It's almost as good as if he had a Stand Your Ground T-shirt, right?
Yeah. There we go.
Just nuts. I don't know, but again, it's just about the money in my view. So let's figure out what else is going on. I guess Jeb and Mitt there's a meeting of the mind.
Yep, they met today in Utah for a private little meeting. This was initially organized before Mitt Romney declared his intentions to run. So now this was probably a bit of an awkward spot between the two potential candidates for 2016, both of whom are fighting right now to get establishment support and even more importantly, establishment money. We haven't really gotten a full readout of what that meeting consisted of, but that's something that we're going to be keeping an eye out for quite some time because, that has to be a pretty interesting meeting considering that they both seem to want to be president pretty badly.
Yeah, I keep seeing a whole bunch of people putting exploratory committees together, and I guess Lindsey Graham said he's going to throw one together to see what test the waters, if you will.
Yeah, that's going to be a little interesting. I don't even know what to say then. But
That's enough said. But after the State of the Union response, I keep thinking, maybe Joni Ernst is going to be the next one. Maybe a Coke president. Look at that.
There we go. No, I mean, I think the idea of giving it to Joni Ernst was probably a way to avoid what sort of seems to be the GOP response curse. We saw Bobby Jindal's taken down a peg when he gave his and came off as sort of a Mr. Rogers-like person. We saw Marco Rubio enter a little bit of some trouble when he did his and ended up reaching for a water bottle. We saw the Tea Party State of the Union response to Michelle Bachmann, which
off-center
sort of depicted her, off-center with deep black eyes. And so I think by throwing out a new freshman member who, was a woman and popular and whatnot, the GOP avoided, perhaps ruining a potential presidential contender for 2016 too early. So that was a nice thoughts behind the strategy there.
So they threw her out there with her camouflage pumps on. Which I thought were quite funny. But did you see Ted Cruz's? I don't even know what that was. Wanting to start over. His reaction or response.
Yeah, I think I was actually standing next to him when that happened. I didn't see that on TV. Did that not look very good?
No,
was that live?
No, it was on YouTube. You saw it online. It didn't make it to TV. That went straight to video.
I see. Yeah, no, that was in Statuary Hall, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Next to so that was right next to our station. He seemed to be a little bit caught off guard there. I think he was thinking that was pre-recorded with I think Turkish TV or BBC or something like that.
Yeah.
But that was pretty interesting to watch from the other side of things.
Yeah. Well, they took it down, so don't worry about it. And finally, evidently, what's going on with Iran?
We have quite a few actions being taken right now by congressional Republicans to try to put the sanctions back into place while the administration continues to negotiate with Iran. We have the House Speaker and Republican leaders in the Senate inviting Benjamin Netanyahu to address a joint session of Congress, essentially to promote sanctions against Iran, directly going against the administration's moves to try to increase diplomatic efforts with them. That's something that has been described as the White House as a, certain change in protocol that's existed, considering it's inviting a foreign leader without consulting the White House or State Department to effectively rally, people against sanctions with Iran. But nevertheless, to effectively rally people against a proposal by the administration. But nevertheless, it looks like that is going to be taking place on February 11th. And, we'll certainly be getting a little bit of attention once that arrives.
Any word on Netanyahu's role in being invited?
There's a lot of speculation that this is probably politically motivated. He's facing re-election. It's not doing very well. And by doing this, it's something that will, help him sort of raise his profile on the world stage even higher than it is already and help solidify his hardline talk. And so it's sort of a scratch your back, you scratch mine between him and Republican leaders. He benefits from something that's going to help him in the campaign world. Republicans benefit by being able to thumb their nose at Obama, and everybody in that scenario wins.
Yeah, except the citizens that have more divided, gridlocked government, and nothing's going to get done for 2 years. Yeah, that it's only that.
Oh yeah.
Jeez, Justin, I appreciate the time, man.
Thank you, Rick.
Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Wow.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. President Obama delivered his State of the Union address yesterday. Obama did make some foreign policy announcements, like this appeal in the fight against the Islamic State.
And tonight I call on this Congress to show the world that we are united in this mission by passing a resolution to authorize the use of force against ISIL. We need that authority.
But overall, Obama left out important details about how a number of pressing foreign policy issues will be approached in the coming months. The Islamic State was singled out as a terrorizing menace, but Al-Qaeda or Yemen? No mention. On Cuba, Obama was upbeat about the mutual benefits of improved relations, but on the topic of his democratic expectations for the island, he said only that negotiations would, quote, stand up for democratic values. The president dodged the Middle East peace process, mentioning Israel only once in the context of Iranian nuclear talks, and Palestine, not a word. Obama made no mention of Boko Haram or how to stop the group. In fact, he only mentioned the continent of Africa twice and made no reference to individual countries. But for all the foreign policy nuance missing from the speech, Obama did dust off the issue of climate change and allude to the role he intends to play ahead of global climate talks in December.
I am determined to make sure that American leadership drives international action. In Beijing, we made a historic announcement. The United States will double the pace at which we cut carbon pollution, and China committed for the first time to limiting their emissions. And because the world's two largest economies came together, other nations are now stepping up and offering hope that this year, the world will finally reach an agreement to protect the one planet we've got.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
McDonald's is scrambling, and I'm not talking about eggs. You know your business has what image consultants call quality perception issues when you have to launch a PR initiative that publicly addresses such questions as, does McDonald's beef contain worms? Thornier yet for the world's largest burger machine is its boneheaded response to the remarkable ongoing rebellion by fast food workers who are demanding a $15 an hour wage and the freedom to unionize without corporate retaliation. McDonald's responded by, guess what? Retaliating. Big Mac managers illegally reduced the hours and therefore the pay of hundreds of those who joined the Fight for 15 campaign. And many managers also spied on workers, interrogated and threatened them, and imposed restrictions on their freedom even to talk about unions or working conditions. The corporation now faces federal charges on hundreds of labor law violations, as well as facing rising consumer anger over its ham-handed tactics. Naturally, McDonald's responded by apologizing and raising wages. Ha, just kidding. Instead, it's running a new series of TV ads that, astonishingly, tries to tap into people's emotions about such tragic events as 9/11, as well as linking its logo to people's positive feelings about veterans, birthdays, and even love. McD's corporate marketing director explains that the ads are all about the golden arches shining brightly in every community, being with us through the good and the bad. As she puts it, who better to stand up for loving than McDonald's? This is Jim Hightower saying, huh? She should ask protesting workers about the love they're getting from McDonald's. Oh, to be fair, the bosses did make one change for workers, new uniforms, supposedly to buff up the corporation's public image. That's not just boneheaded, it's pathetic.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Working class heroes, they are the ones who helped to build this land. Working class heroes, they stayed united, always hand in hand.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, download the podcast there at the website or get the app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Google Play, iTunes, all of that. Also, if you want to check out the Labor History Minutes, share that around our new project for 2015. Every day we write and produce a new little 2-minute labor history clip that I highly suggest you share around to your friends, discuss, get back with us. I'm looking forward to it. It's been very exciting. We've actually hit one of the, on the Podbean site that we hosted on, one of the most popular education podcasts there. So very happy about that. Looking to continue that and to grow. I would love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your comments. And for me, really, everything comes back to education. I think about, today we've talked an awful lot about it. Whether it's allowing the crazy people to overtake the school board, whether it's an appointed school board taking over a teacher's contract and ripping it to shreds, whether it's underfunding, whether it's any of that stuff. Now is the time that we need to be fighting for it. And I've been saying for a while, this is the hill. This is the hill that we die on. This is where we have to be absolutely, unequivocally. We have to be on the side of teachers. And it's, to me, that simple. Now, the question that I have is, in the face of this judge's ruling that pretty much that undoes everything that the SRC is doing, what's going to happen to the chairman? Will the chairman of the SRC step down? Will Bill Green step down? I hope so. Look, I mean, when what your ideological disposition is, when it's been rebuked, when your plan's been, sorry, you've screwed this up, time for you to go. That's how people get fired, at least in the meritocracy world. It's time for him to go. And, look, the reality is there's a problem there. And I think Mr. Green and I think a lot of the other SRC people who are pushing towards privatization, they're more the problem than the solution. But it still comes back to Harrisburg. This monster was created there. This whole charter school thing where, as we talked about earlier, a huge sum of money sitting in the hands of the charter operators that could have been used to, fund education. That could have been used to, instead of building Mr. Gregorian a new home, could have been used to put a roof on the school. Could have been used to buy books for the school. For me, it's very clear and very simple. And what we need to be doing and what we need to be thinking about is how we hold these people accountable. And I got to tell you, we've got a governor who, I think is going to lead us in the right direction, but he's going to need help, which means that we have to be contacting our representatives. We have to be writing letters to the editor. We've got to be talking to our friends and neighbors, because I don't know what the next 2 years are going to look like. I hope it's not total and complete gridlock. And I guess we'll know that right out of the gate here with the legislation that the Republicans push. There's a whole bunch of proposals, and the vast majority of them really bad. But we'll see where they put their muscle, where they put their shoulder into, where they start pushing from. To me, that's going to be the big question, which is why the hope is that we stay involved, we stay active, and we keep pushing. Pretty simple stuff. Anyway, as I said, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. We've got the interviews lined up. We've got the entire show right there for your entertainment, your enjoyment. Also, get the app on your smartphone. Beautiful app, always on, always available, and best of all, free. And you can also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate the comments. A bunch of emails I didn't get to. Thank you for reaching out. I look forward to tomorrow, where it's our Future Friday and the end of I think a pretty decent week. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to the Rick Smith Show.